virtual work session tonight. And I want to mention that Director Bowen said she was having connectivity problems and maybe a little late, or she'll try to call in. So just an update on that. Please have patience with me tonight. I've been on 5 hours already on Zoom today, so I'm going on my 6th hour here. So I want to start off here and anxious to hear from Dr. Watts with his presentation to our ongoing conversation that we started on our meeting before. Dr. Watts.
Thank you, President Hamada, members of the board, staff, and community. Today is certainly a day that we have continued to discuss regarding superintendent goals and key performance indicators. Today, I'll be presenting the culmination, or I'll say the progress and culmination to this point of our discussions, as well as the metrics or KPIs or key performance indicators that would support the evaluation process. I'm going to share the document, just one moment. Thank you for your patience. Just one second. Okay. Can you see that document? Okay. All right, what you have in front of you should be Kent School District Board of Directors Superintendent's Evaluation. That's a yes? Okay, perfect. I'll begin the presentation with a quote from someone whom we've all heard of, Albert Einstein, who has a penchant for all things knowledge and information. But one of my favorite quotes of his is pertinent for today. He states that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And what he means by that is that whether it's a metric or a document or information or a number, there is meaning that we derive from that. Sometimes there's more meaning, sometimes there may be less, but it's our context and it's the process that we derive, especially in this evaluation process, that brings meaning not only to the metrics, to the numbers, but to the evaluation process itself. So first, the title page speaks to our guidance as to why we exist, our mission statement, our vision statement, as well as our school board directors and the team that will support the evaluation process. I'll also share the purpose of evaluation. I think it's important for us to know why it is that we're doing this work. The evaluation of a superintendent of schools is important. It's a responsibility, obviously, of the Kent School District Board of Directors. The purpose shall be to assist the superintendent in improving job performance, to provide ways by which there's a need for improvement can be met, and to clarify the board's expectations of the superintendent and to improve communication between the board and the superintendent. I've listed and shared with you earlier the suggested steps for the annual superintendent evaluation, and we have those dates set, as I recall, for our interim evaluation conversations. I have noted for number 3, the school directors independently evaluate the superintendent using the evaluation instrument. Each member will determine if performance was met for each task. And I noted this as a question, but just the assumption that the superintendent, as I, would be allowed to provide evidence that would be aligned with those tasks. And obviously that would support your ability to provide clear, concise evaluation. The metrics and the documentation itself was adapted from two sources. One, our own Washington State School Directors Association, as well as adapted from thoughts, ideas originating from Georgia School Board Association site. So the evaluation instrument for 2020, 2021 also wanted to make sure that we defined our terms. And so those, well, we'll not read those, just note that they are there for our clear understanding to make sure that we are all reaching consensus on what the definition of a goal is, what the definition of evidence is, the actual rating scale that we'll be using, which has not changed from our last rating session, the comment section, and the importance of the governance team responsibilities, that there should be some mutual agreement and conversation that takes place within and amongst board members, not only at the end of the evaluation, but throughout the evaluation process. This takes us now to goal one. Goal one is, and I think we all know, and all educators believe, we have many different responsibilities, but our primary responsibility is to increase student performance. We're here for the sole purpose of the students we serve, and it's our staff, obviously, and our resources that we provide to support them. With a description as written, as agreed upon by the governance team, the superintendent will, and here are the indicators. What you'll see in red are examples of either review or clarifying statements or wonderings that based on our original conversation that we may need to consider as we move the evaluation process forward, or clarifying statements to make sure that the information is crystal clear. First indicator, ensuring all students are college and career ready upon graduation. That obviously supports our vision statement. Indicators 1 through 3. So I'll refer to them as indicator first based on the actual goal. So goal 1, indicator 1. In this case, indicator 1, report on 4-year cohort graduation rate for the class of 2020. The target increase by 3%. And I mentioned that previously, while 3% is typically an indicator of gradual progress, given the complexity of the change that would need to take place, 3 is typically an average indicator of success or increase, expected increase year over time. That's the 4-year cohort graduation rate. Remember that cohort rate means that when a student, the moment that student becomes a 9th grader, the 4-year cohort rate requires that clock starts ticking. And as soon as that 9th grader becomes a 9th grader, they will have 4 years to graduate or be eligible for graduation to be included in the 4-year cohort. That same group, if it takes them an additional year, 5 years, they would also be included in a cohort graduation rate, but they would be included in the 5-year cohort graduation rate. Number 3, implementing student data project to assess post-secondary persistence beyond 2 years. And I mentioned earlier, this is a topic that we discussed about 5 years ago, actually, when I arrived, that while we do not currently have the membership, we can certainly re-up and renew. But the National Student Clearinghouse is based out of Harvard University, and what they do is monitor metrics based on student ID. And upon graduation, they can determine how and to what extent our students are persisting, meaning that they are moving from year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3, and ideally year 3 to year 4 in college prior to graduation. So one of the major metrics and key performance indicators for success post-secondary is the degree to which our students are persisting, meaning they are remaining enrolled in a post-secondary experience for at least 2 years. that's an indicator that they will more than likely complete their post-secondary experience. Now, I'm letting you know, that is a metric that does not come without a cost. I believe it's a minimal nominal fee, relatively speaking, but I'll certainly have those data and metrics to you. That's something that we want to continue. I believe that's an important aspect for not just for my evaluation, but more importantly, for us to know and have a greater sense of how our students are performing once they leave us. That's the greatest measure of success, certainly how they're performing while they're enrolled in Kent School District. More importantly, our true measure of success is how our students are performing once they graduate from Kent School District. Indicator 2, to ensure mastery of curriculum. I've noted the underlined in parenthetical or notes in red and underlined state a unique challenge that we have, obviously in COVID environment. Unless something changes drastically, we do not expect to have a state assessment this year for the class of 2021. Certainly, we can take a look at, obviously, even the metrics for 2020, but student achievement reported on state assessment. Indicator 1, increase the percent of students in grades 3 through 8 at or above proficiency levels. Student achievement reported on state assessments. Indicator 2 is 9 through 12, scoring at or above proficiency levels. And the indicator 3 is development and implementation of school improvement plans. And that gets to what I've said before. It's good for us to measure how our students are responding, how they're performing, but we also need to take a look at what is it that we expected our students to do in the first place. And that's why school improvement plans are important for us to monitor and align those with our student performance goals. But due to COVID-19, the federal government, as we know, did not require states to administer annual summative assessments. And it's really unclear if we're going to have those assessments for 2021. So there is a metric that we can use. While summative assessments are assessments of learning, meaning that comes at the end of when students are being taught, or end of a unit or end of a year. I recommend that we use our formative assessments, iReady, which our schools are currently using. And we have greater opportunity for our students to have access to interim assessment, so we can get an idea of how well, to what degree they're mastering our curriculum. So that is a reasonable, we'll call it a reasonable, not accommodation, but essentially a reasonable opportunity for our students and for the evaluation process to support mastery of curriculum. Goal 3, or indicator 3, to identify, implement, and support intervention and acceleration programs. Number 1, students' performance reported by local and state assessments. Again, it's in a normal year if we were to have state assessments. Target is to increase the performance of students by grade level by 3%. Again, the metric that we would recommend, is the iReady assessment. 2, reporting on the number of students on track to graduate by 10th grade. And this is a similar metric that we used in my evaluation process from last year. And remember, that is an indicator that, assuming that all students have enrolled at the same time, our goal is that our students should have completed the half of the number of credits. So we should expect our students by 10th grade to have earned 12 credits towards graduation based on a 24 credit standard. And assuming that our students are on target, that certainly would give an indication that they are on track towards graduation on time. The goal or target would be to increase that percentage of students by 3%. Which takes us to goal 2, increasing student and stakeholder involvement and engagement. And this, of course, we've had many conversations. I know that we have done some incredible work in making sure that we are, to the best of our ability, we are tracking our students and engaging our students. And I know there's still work to be done. Hear me when I say that. But the description for goal 2 is not only to increase student and stakeholder involvement, but engagement means that they have an emotional attachment to their school, to the school house, to Kent School District, and their families are also feeling a high level of engagement. So the superintendent seeks input from identified stakeholders because we can't know how our students are performing or what they're feeling if we're not engaging with them in multiple ways. We're doing so to actively support, to maintain school system environments that are safe, that are productive for student learning and quality teaching, and they're also monitored through a lens of racial equity. Indicator 1, to increase stakeholder involvement and engagement. Superintendent will support or report stakeholder satisfaction surveys to the extent that we have those available. That would include thought exchange, that would include surveys that we've conducted thus far. And as you see in red and underlined, I would indicate and provide documents through a portfolio. Some documents, as I mentioned through the quote, not everything that counts can be counted, but this information would more than likely come in some percentages, but also in narratives, in the words that are shared from our stakeholders. Development and implementation of a district-wide communications plan, increase diversity of opportunities for students and stakeholders to provide feedback, and to provide regular, timely, and relevant updates to the board about district operations. Indicator 2 for goal 2 is recognizing and understanding the roles and responsibilities within board governance, concept, and communications protocol. You may recall I had originally identified this as a kind of a chain of command conversation. And while I understand what that means, I didn't like that language. And the idea is that each one of us has a role and responsibility. So what I've emphasized is that we're all, as a board governance team, that we are recognizing, understanding our unique, similar, and yet separate roles in many cases. But when we're working together, the premise is that our work together as a board superintendent governance team, as effectively as we are working together, will impact positively outcomes for our organization, for our students, for our staff. So first indicator, superintendent reports are shared with board, demonstrating resolution of stakeholders' concerns following the established communication protocol and process. 2, to complete revisions to communications protocols. I know that we began some work that I know is outlined in our BoardDocs statement, and we still have some work to do there as well. And so that implies that each one of us will be engaged in that work, and the goal is that we get to that finish line. 3, to participate in self-assessment of the governance team structure, our respective roles and responsibilities in governance decisions. We had a pre-assessment already with Tricia Lubach and through WASDA in governance decisions, and recommend action plans which addresses appropriate findings and or recommendations. And again, these indicators would be evidenced by a document portfolio of either metrics or assessments or documents and information that I've shared with you previously. Third indicator, increasing community involvement. Indicators are first, district website is updated on a regular basis and provides communication avenues to receive staff and community input, and share strategic communications and scorecard information. And what I mean by scorecard information is more similar to a data dashboard that provides metrics or updates in a numerical fashion or in a form that's symbolic, so that individuals can understand, where do we start? Where do we want to be? And then how close are we to achieving our goals? And those scorecards really serve as a checkpoint along the way. Indicator 2, to expand partnerships with colleges, universities, and community-based organizations that support racial equity and inclusion. And that conversation is ongoing. We know that our work, not only in Kent School District, but certainly in our region, supports the notion that racial equity is not only important, but it's necessary to make sure that we are identifying students who may be furthest away from educational opportunity, access, and beliefs about their ability to perform. And our goal is to make sure that we invite or engage with outside agencies, as I began in this presentation, We cannot, nor should we ever want to do this work by ourselves. And so this would be an indicator of either reinforcing or re-engaging with colleges and universities, or identifying the college and universities or community-based programs of which we're or with which we are working. Number 3, reports on the implementation of the strategic plan. We know that this is, again, an ongoing conversation, and we will certainly begin to see fruits of that effort. That includes not only our strategic plan updates, but strategic initiatives and impacts that are related to COVID-19. Strategic initiatives are those initiatives that are supported by our 4 goals, and also those initiatives that are supported by our priorities that we are certainly engaged in right now. The priorities that began with our 3 action learning projects. Remember, the first of which was creating a culture of care, a warm, welcoming environment for our schools, our students, and our central office staff or central office facilities. Second was to increase opportunities for rigorous course offerings, challenging coursework for our students, programs and initiatives as well. And third was to decrease disproportionality of student discipline rates, where students were remanded to or for disciplinary actions based on behavior. And what we know is that at this point, if a student happens to be Black or African American and happens to be male, that they are more than 2 times likely to be remanded for a disciplinary event based on our current statistics. And so how do we address those matters? That is where the action learning projects come in, and certainly where a part of my evaluation, and I certainly hold myself accountable in helping to provide support and to hold those who are serving our students as well to the same account in the best interest and what's in the best interest of our students. Again, those indicators would be evidenced by documentation or document portfolio. As you also see, the ratings are listed under each. Those the same indicators. It's again, a 4-point scale from unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. And those titles or those ratings are identified on this scale that you'll have available for you. Goal 3, to recruit, hire, develop, and retain a diverse and high-performing workforce. Again, this supports the notion that we are an employer, and that as an employer, we hire individuals who are our employees. And as Chief Executive Officer and General Supervisor of District Employees, the descriptions note that superintendent will implement a human resources program to effectively recruit, select, onboard, support, and retain a diverse and premier, or in this case, high-performing staff to carry out the district's vision, mission, and core values. Indicators for Goal 3, to provide high-quality, culturally relevant professional development for all staff. Increase participation in frontline. Signing in target was 100% staff complete. We talked about this during our last session, and that's why I shared with you some of the discussions that we shared and in my review with team, recognizing that we have most of what we need to monitor and provide metrics that would support whether or to what degree we were on track. The targeting of 100%, the notion that anyone can actually achieve 100% of anything on a consistent basis, I'd say that would be unrealistic. And I'm not saying that to say that I don't want to hold myself to a high standard. But what we are saying is that in order to do this, we would have to make sure that every individual was actually going to complete at least one of those offerings. And we know that not everyone is going to sign up for a particular professional development experience, but there are ways that we can monitor, whether it be 80%, for example, which is typically a industry standard for mastery. And so we can certainly discuss that, but the recommendation I certainly would say is that it's hard to place a 100% at all for any indicator based on this metric. So in order to meet this requirement, I've noted that Kent School District would have to allocate additional resources, time, or money to support reaching this goal. And part of that is based on the metrics that we currently, the actual instruments that we currently have. Goal 3, indicator 3, to improve district processes to attract and retain diverse and highly effective staff indicator. So the reporting of exiting staff members, completing an exit survey. This is another, I think, a very interesting topic that we also discussed. And it's interesting because, again, we also agreed upon during that session, or I think I heard there was a recommendation certainly for 100% exit survey sent to 100% of exiting staff is different than what we had talked about. We talked about 100% of our staff taking the survey or responding to it. And that is certainly an expectation that we would all want. The challenge to that and the unrealistic expectation to that is that we can provide the exit survey to 100% of our staff, but we can't compel them to complete it. And so if the target is that 100% would actually complete the exit survey, that may be certainly an unrealistic expectation. What we want to make sure is that everyone has the opportunity to take that. We want to measure what it is that we're hearing from those who are taking it. Indicator 2 for goal 3, increasing district retention rate. So in this case, that each year, the goal is that we are increasing those who remain employed, and the target would be that we would increase that number of those who remain employed from the previous year by at least 5%. Now, again, a notation: in order to meet indicator 2, KSD would also have to make potentially significant resource investment. Why? One indicator that we know of about retention has to do with compensation. That is I would say a lagging indicator, but that's also an indicator that does indicate whether or not individuals choose to stay. There's also indicators that we could gather from stay interviews, which we also shared and discussed. That takes us to indicator 3 for goal 3, creating a leadership pipeline. And we did also discuss questions about what this actually meant, I think, in our original conversation. A leadership pipeline for all employee groups to promote, and that should be diverse or promote diversity, actually. So to create a succession planning model that supports increased opportunities for internal promotion and diverse hires. And so the leadership pipeline or the succession planning model supports that we are focusing on staff members and employees who are currently employed, but are also focusing on how we can diversify our staff. That may be from hiring from within individuals who are in different employee groups who may wish to create an opportunity to serve in a different role. For example, our paraeducators who may want to grow and learn and become a classroom teacher. There are several employee groups that we know that are by definition, those groups and by number are more diverse or less diverse than others. How might we use the employees and the opportunity employee groups that we have with us to help through questioning, through posing or actually identifying skill sets, talents, and abilities to say, hey, have you ever thought about serving in this capacity? And those are examples of how a leadership pipeline can be developed, or a succession planning model can also be employed. And that, as we discussed, we've gone from, instead of 4 to 3 goals, but increased the depth of the key performance indicators to ensure that we were actually working and making significant progress towards those goals. So I will continue sharing, but stop to pause for any questions, clarifying statements.
To begin with, Dr. Watts, I want to thank you for looking at some of the language through a different lens of leadership and I've been studying all day about how policy, in the language in policy, how we look at it could be more effective in really representing all of our community. So I noticed that. So thank you for, taking the lead on that. That's a comment. I'm curious, your last indicator here, talking about your fourth indicator or fourth goal.
The third, it's,
Wait a minute there.
yes. I'm sorry, I'll go one more.
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, and this is when we're talking about opportunities for our employees to have a ladder to move up.
Yes.
At present, we were talking a lot about some things on Friday at our special meeting. I was wondering, in our most categories where we have most diversity, at present today, do we have an opportunity, and does this include in the future some of our categories where we have such a diverse force that wouldn't even think about perhaps even going into another field? What do you have in store at present? If you could just give me an actual read on that. Say I've been a custodian at Covington Elementary for 10 years, great employee, but I would like to increase my salary and my position and my learning to maybe move to a position of maybe paraeducator or security or something like that. Are we offering those internal, are we suggesting to our certain categories, or all of our categories, not just what they would normally think they could do, but really thinking outside of the box? Like if I were in that position as in custodial work at Covington, maybe I've never thought about being a paraeducator. Are there some avenues that we can and do offer in the future for them to stay with us, but increase in salary in those things? Are we doing that at present?
So if I understand your question correctly, and I think I do, President Hamada, we have several opportunities, what I would call for identifying talent, and I would say internal. We refer to them as job fairs or opportunities for advancement. Generally speaking, because certain roles and responsibilities or certain jobs require certain certification, it may not be as swift of a transitional opportunity from one role to another. But what I do know, and in conversations that I've been having, and certainly with Dr. Behringer and with Joyce Wilson from and Kathy Landowski as well in leadership development, as well as our team and executive cabinet, that we know there are individuals who have talents and skills that we may not recognize. But if we're not asking the right questions, if we're not creating a deliberate and intentional process to say, hey, if you're interested in this role, for example, if I'm a custodian, I may have skill sets that would support maybe working in another area of central office, namely maintenance or facilities. And that's a very aligned support or track, if you will, that would support opportunities for us to grow our own. Now, I can't tell you exactly what skill sets might need to be developed or honed in order to qualify for those roles, but I would be surprised if there weren't individuals who did not have the minimum qualifications for roles such as that. It just takes now an opportunity for us to create those systems and invite individuals or help people to see who may have never thought about that opportunity in the first place. So yes, do I believe that is certainly an opportunity? I'd have to speak further with staff to see exactly how many, because I can't tell you other than our traditional job fairs and opportunities such as that. But I see that as I think a very viable option for us to retain and also to provide others with another way of looking at their career advancement opportunity.
And do we at present have any handle on the number of individuals who have perhaps changed and increased in responsibility from one category to another and into salary? Do we presently have that data? I'm just curious.
I'm sure we could identify that. I can't tell you that I know that exactly right now. That those are data that we'd have to look at carefully. But if that's something that you would, yeah, no, I think you've asked. We can certainly take a closer look and see what specifically. Can you help me understand what is it at the end of the day? What is it that you would really like to see as a result of the question that you're asking, so I can better understand it?
The impact.
Okay.
Get to the bottom line, Leslie. What I'm trying to say is retention is a huge thing. It's financially beneficial, and their knowledge and everything is great to have that and keep them with us. But I often think sometimes with the students that I've worked with, that I've taken them to different places, to colleges or to career paths that they never were introduced to before. And I've taken them up to the university and walked around the campuses and stuff. They never even thought about that they could attend these schools. It opened an opportunity to them to see it through a different lens. And I just hope with our employee staff, I've kind of focused on the kids, but also thinking back on this now is let's also be offering that with our employees, a ladder that they can climb up to higher and higher positions. That's what I'm after.
No, I appreciate that. President Armando, what you mentioned. So you touched on something that I didn't really identify or speak to broadly. We've talked about employees and succession planning. We have talked at great length, and I've had many more conversations with our Educators of Color network and allies, with Dr. Behringer and with our team about truly identifying the workforce that exists in our schools and our classrooms every day. We've already known that if we truly want to diversify our workforce, particularly amongst our instructional staff or teaching staff, creating a pathway for our students who, and what we've learned from conversations is that most of our high school students, they don't necessarily, when they think about teaching, they don't necessarily think about teaching elementary school students by and large, but they think about their most recent experience, especially if they've enjoyed their high school experience and they want to give back. It's a great opportunity for them to say, hey, maybe I want to not only become a teacher, but I want to be a teacher at the high school where I graduated from because of what it gave to me. If we had that pathway created to support that, and we certainly are closer than we've ever been. I think it's something that's a viable option for us. We could have one of the most diverse teaching workforces within 4 years, every year, based on our student body. And so, hear me when I say the goal is, and I've said this before, that diversifying our workforce is good for all of our employees, for our employees of color, for our white employees, to see that what can be, and to experience the diversity of thought, diversity of cultural experiences. And that again is what education is supposed to be about.
And I'm not going to take up any more of the conversation, but I've seen this with my own daughter, who has taught for 25 years and brought just this year 4 teachers into the workforce in her category that she teaches in, because they saw what she did. She worked hard with those students and brought them forth and helped all them facilitate all the stuff to try to get to where they wanted to go. And that difference of the teacher-student relationship beyond the classroom has elicited 4 excellent young people to now be in the teaching profession. So,
good for her. That's the way we grow it, and several ways to do it. Thank you. I know I want to value our time, and I know we also have a presentation for Core 24, but I certainly want to give our board time for follow-up.
Yes, thank you. I do have questions.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask about, well, first on section 2,
Yes.
or goal 2, pardon me, number 3, we talk about increasing the community involvement. And I really wonder if we should elaborate on that, detail out that action learning projects, because when we say strategic initiatives, I feel it's a little too fluffy. and it's not really getting to the crux of it. And
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead, Dr.
No,
Woods.
no, I interrupted. Please continue.
Okay. So on that number 3, I wonder if we should detail out those action learning projects, because it is a critical piece that we've discussed as a board, superintendent, and governance team. And, I feel like it's been sort of in the back burner, even though, I know we're in COVID state, and how, to the highest degree possible, how do we apply those learning projects to this current state? So that was one of my comments. And then secondly, under Premier's workforce, I see we're talking about culturally relevant training, but I wonder if we should call out racial equity, because that is part of, that is our policy. And
Yes.
and I don't see it being called out. So I wonder if that would be important. And then I'm just going quickly over my
Please.
comments. And then third, the exit survey, the question on that is, how do we monitor that as a board? If we're just sending it to the 100% of the employees, as a board, it would be important for us to see what it is, what are the patterns. And I know there are presentations that come up, but I feel like it's sort of generalized and we don't get a real good sense of where is the ongoing concern. And I feel like we need to look at it not as a punitive thing, but as, how do we better ourselves as a district? And so for that reason, I wonder why we're not doing stay interviews. And even if the retention is high, I have to kind of question, are there reasons why it's high? Do people feel forced to stay because of job, opportunities don't exist elsewhere? So I do wonder about that, if we should just monitor the retention, or how do we monitor the current environment in the workplace? So those are just my questions.
Okay. There are some
There's a lot.
tools. No, I understand. And this is, obviously this is part of the presentation. This certainly doesn't dictate our having a follow-up conversation in any other forum. But there are organizations that support strengths-based leadership, Strengths Finder, for example, those stay interviews. What research has shown is that if we can find out why a staff member employee tends to stay, as opposed to what factors associate why they would leave, it's easier to keep them than it is to stop them from leaving, if that makes sense. So if we know what those are, we can. So I appreciate this. What I heard is change or obviously consider strategic initiatives, but specifying action learning projects, or the themes that are associated with action learning projects, call those out, calling out racial equity more so than we have, and exit surveys, stay interviews, consideration, monitoring retention, and strengths. Did I capture that?
Yes,
well,
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, Director Bettinger? Yes.
Yeah, I have some. I was just waiting to see if anyone else did.
Please.
You know me, just always, it's just going through when we have numbers, 3% increase on the very first ones.
Yes.
It's like, are we measuring class of 2019 against class of 2020? Or are we measuring our performance against the state?
So we're measuring class of 2020 relative to, and we can actually really, I guess that's a good question. It really depends. We can measure against whatever metric we'd like.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was to, based on increase by 3%, the implication is that we're comparing class of 2020 to class of 2019.
Okay.
Now, that's not obviously there are different students, different cohort, but the the metric itself is what we're continuously trying to improve.
Okay, I got that.
Yep.
Yeah, and then also I think I agree with Director Vengadaslam about the action learning projects. I had that same note.
Okay.
And when we talk about personal development, is that available to everyone from bus drivers up to the chiefs? Everyone gets the opportunity to, every work group has the opportunity, access to a computer on site, et cetera, has the time available to be able to participate in the professional development?
Well, they should. So when you say it depends on what the professional development is. I guess that would be. So if we're talking about, for example, I know Safe Schools online is one opportunity. It's not necessarily a professional development, but it could be viewed as such. As long as anyone has access to a digital device, they can take that course. Same with our frontline for individuals to sign up for professional development, but not all employee groups would have the same type of professional development, if that makes sense.
Okay, kind of to piggyback on what
Sure.
President Hamada was talking about, equity and opportunity, et cetera. Using her example of the custodian is, as you've indicated already, it's time and money. Are we allowing every single employee to have the opportunity, if they so desire, to take these professional development classes? There's a lot of classes that are just helpful, just
Sure.
understanding how to use Excel or whatever it is. And many organizations, they'll offer a percentage of time a week to take classes, or they will offer, time. Is there a place if one of our, using President Hamada's example of this fictional custodian at Covington Elementary has been there 10 years, would they have access to a district computer to be able to log in and take a class?
Yeah, I think we could make access or provide access to that, and we offer, for example, Microsoft Suite offer professional development, in Excel or Word. But I think the reality that we're talking about is what that's important. And I think what's equally as important is for us to identify, to connect with those individuals in a way that perhaps we haven't done in the past, to see what is it that you see yourself doing, or have you thought about another career? And then we could actually identify what those professional development opportunities could be added to their suite of solutions or opportunities, so that they could get closer to. But I think you've touched upon something that we can always, certainly an area we can improve.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's just, Disney does that great. That's one of their best things. Everyone has the opportunity to learn, and they get time to do so.
Yes.
And as part of it, sometimes it's like the only time you have is during your working hours. And it's pretty much proven that if someone does want to, say, take a class like that, using President Hamada's example, 9 times out of 10, they can make it work to take, if you give them an hour or two a week during their working hours to participate. And again, that goes into it. Yes, it is a financial cost, but it is an investment, So, because we've talked about it quite a bit, our most diverse labor groups, and so that's really on my mind and my heart. What are we doing to support and real actionable steps?
Absolutely. No, I think those are all, and I appreciate the feedback. Again, these are topics that are not new. They are newly important, and we are certainly going to be focusing. And this is why I think this evaluation process is not just about me. It is, I certainly take full responsibility, but it is about how the organization is aligned to support and address the needs that we've identified. And I think we've done so even in a broader way than we did when we first had this conversation. So I do appreciate it.
Because why can't a custodian someday become a teacher in our district if they so desire, and or superintendent in our district, or a chief?
Absolutely.
It's not limiting It's creating a pathway, and
Absolutely.
that's true retention, is to create a pathway.
Yes, or a board director. I mean, that
Or
is
a
the
board
reality.
director. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. No,
Absolutely. Yeah.
the possibilities are endless. I don't
Yeah.
disagree, and we have to create opportunities for that. Yes.
That's the one you don't need credentials for. So I do, Director Venture, are you finished? I have a question about,
Please.
okay. So I think one of the things that might be helpful is, I know, and I'm assuming this is the same for Kent,
Yes.
there are professional development dollars available in contracts. There are professional development incentives available. So there's a lot that's available that perhaps it might be beneficial to maybe review some of the CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements, and see what is available to employees, because they do have, again, monies, they have incentives, they have time and classes. So I think there are some things that are available that
they're already engaged in.
That they're already engaged in that we might not be aware of. So just as a, you can kind of see, maybe this one group gets tuition reimbursement, or maybe another group gets, a certain amount of money for PD dollars. But that does exist in, I would guess, in Kent, similar as other districts, most contracts and most CBAs for every group.
I would piggyback on, I would be interested in that too, Vice President Daniels. One thing though, we can't ever minimize the importance of relationships, because sometimes a lot of stuff can be out there, but just like with kids, until somebody really takes them under their wing and touches bases with them, they don't get it. I mean, they just don't feel like that's for me for some reason. I want to be extremely fair tonight to our presenter on Core 24. I'd like some help on this, on the goals and your key indicators here, Dr. Watts. We, as I understand, are going to be voting on these tonight. If there's some additions that we've had or little things we want to add, how does that work with going forward? Can we still vote and have it be fluid to more input, or
you can vote
they have to be locked into stone tonight, or what?
No, you can vote to approve the process. If there are topics or discussions that need, or metrics that need to be, I won't say need to be, that you've identified right now that I agree with, that can be adjusted. That's the purpose of this meeting.
Okay.
We're not changing the process or the evaluation itself.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
Is there any further discussion on any of these? And Director Bowen just sent me another text that she's on the help desk trying to get on. So
I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Did you have any questions? Did you have any questions tonight?
No, I didn't have any questions about this. I didn't want to interrupt because when I came on, you were talking, so I didn't want to interrupt. But no, I do not have any questions.
We'll have other opportunities for metric discussions, so this won't be the last. But the process, I appreciate the feedback, and certainly we'll note those suggested changes, and I think we can move forward with the process that we have in place.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. Moving on to the second part of our work session tonight, I'd like to call on Dr. Watts to introduce Dr. Harmon this evening.
Yes, thank you. President Amata, members of the board, I would like to call on Dr. Jewel Harmon, and certainly the great work that has taken place. I know many of you are aware, for our Core 24 update. Dr. Harmon.
Good evening, President Hamada, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley. It's my pleasure to be here to talk about our college and career ready graduation requirements update, Core 24, as it's known. Before I begin, I'll just, really fun fact, I think. I appreciate you all having a conversation about an advancement pipeline, because 20 years ago, I started as a paraeducator. So there's definitely a pathway and a career ladder. It's a real thing. And I've talked to our paraeducators about that. So thank you for the opportunity this evening. I must give all credit to the committee. They are not here tonight because I did not invite them, not because you're not worthy of hearing their voices and they don't have information to share. It's because we don't have a fully baked plan. And we'll get to that why and what that looks like as we go through this process, but definitely tell you more about the hard work that they've done, the wonderful idea that they've come up with, and the hope that we have that we'll be able to pull this off at some point. So I am going to start by sharing my screen, and I'll say, as I always say, I'm going to go through this process, and if you have questions, please feel free to stop me and just interrupt. I can't always see faces when going through this, so make yourself comfortable doing that. So we know why we're here. I'll start with a little bit of history about our college and career ready graduation requirements. So they were passed into law in Washington State in 2014. Districts have always had the option to require more credits for graduation than the state, but never less. Kent in its history has always, well, in its recent history, has required 23 credits of its students. So it's always had a requirement for graduation that was above and beyond what the state required. When this law came into existence, it allowed for the space to make a small leap in transition from what our students were already being required to do to what the state is requiring. The purpose, and so what you see here is from the Washington State Board of Education. It's their illustration of what that looks like for the 24 credits. And the whole intent of the law was to provide a more rigorous high school education for students so that they had options upon graduation for what their life after high school looks like, making their pathways as an adult more flexible, meaning that if they chose to enroll in a four-year college, that they would have the coursework under their belt to do so. If they chose to enroll with a two-year college partner, then they could do that and have the credits they needed to be successful. If they chose to engage in a career pathway and go straight to work, that they were provided the opportunity to explore those interests while in high school. Sorry. So to be fair to the work prior to the committee coming together, KSD staff at the time that the law was passed got together and had internal conversations about a plan and what would need to be done or shifted to support students. And so there were already existing strategies in place to prepare students for making that transition from 23 credits to 24. And so there were school-based pieces. Edgenuity is a system that we've had in place for quite some time, as a tool we've had in place for quite some time for students for credit recovery options. If they need a second opportunity to be successful, there were plans, and our middle schools are provided opportunities to obtain high school credit. In middle school, almost to the extent where just about every middle schooler leaves middle school with a high school credit option opportunity. And I say it that way because the law changed recently where previously it was a parent's choice and student's choice as to whether or not they wanted that high school credit course to show up on their high school transcript that they received in middle school. And they had that opportunity to make up until their senior year at graduation time. The law has changed so it defaults to their transcript, and a parent has to make the request to have it removed. So now our middle schoolers, if they choose to enroll in a high school credit course, they will leave middle school with that credit. There are district policies in place that have also allowed flexibility around credit attainment. So credit for competency and proficiency. There's always been the opportunity for principals to waive credits under certain circumstances for students. And even under the state law, schools have the opportunity to waive 2 of the elective or pathway credits as needed for students as well. At the state level, not necessarily credit specific, but they did provide an opportunity for students to have expedited assessment appeal opportunities, meaning that they could bypass other requirements that were not credit bearing around the state required assessments. And then graduation pathways through other methods as well. Once the law was passed, the Washington State Board of Education allowed districts to request a waiver for up to 2 years to prepare the district and the operations for the requirements of this college and career ready graduation work. And it allowed districts to hold harmless the classes of 2019 and 2020. And what the waiver said wasn't that districts didn't have to try. It wasn't that they couldn't measure and try out other pieces. It said that the state would not hold them accountable, hold those 2 classes accountable if they chose to pursue the waiver for not meeting the 24 credits. Most districts in the state applied for the waiver in 2015 when it was first offered, and it was a rolling application process, so you could apply at any point in time and it would make the State Board of Washington agenda. We submitted our application in the summer of 2018. And so the class of 2021 would be our first accountable class, and it's the first accountable class for most large districts in the state. So because the district's work on the Core 24 plan was not forward facing, it was suggested that there be a committee of community stakeholders to become more engaged in what that plan could look like. And so the scope for that group was to maximize student contact time, be mindful of the cost of implementation and operation, and keep that within reasonable budget expenditures, provide some consistency across high schools for student contact time and teacher preparation time, not exceed current student teacher caseloads, and create more common high school opportunities so that there could be a cross-sharing of staff if needed, because that would facilitate the expansion of small and specialized programs and afford those opportunities to all students in the district. And then, of course, consider student, staff, and community input in this process. So there were identified 3 school districts to kind of learn from in this. Issaquah engaged in their process, I think, in 2015. And they brought a committee of stakeholders together, and they landed on a modified 7-period day with 2 days of block scheduling and flex time. So it's a fairly complex kind of period adjustment and a complete shift in scheduling at the high school for the school district. Lake Washington also adjusted their school day, and they added 25 minutes to the high school day to create a 7th period every day across their high schools. And Seattle, even though they engaged their community stakeholders in the process in developing a plan, they chose to retain their 6-period day with no extension to the school day, but to expand credit earning opportunities in 2019-20. So you see 3 different school districts, 3 very different paths to their district's plan to pursuing this. So the committee developed a timeline. There's a timeline in place of what this would look like and reaching out for volunteers in terms of the meetings that would be had, starting those meetings in the spring of 2019, and letting the committee decide what that looked like into the summer and fall, hoping to share those forward facing with the superintendent and board in the fall of 2019. So as far as the committee meeting history goes, more than 100 people expressed interest in participating. That's a little bit more than the 20 that we were shooting for to have kind of a productive conversation. But after some consideration, no one was excluded from participating. So about 60 external community members and about 25 KSD staff members had valid emails, like confirmed that they wanted to be interested and invested participants in this work. And so a OneNote notebook was created for the committee, and all 85 plus people became members of the Core 24 committee. And the first couple of meetings were pretty large, but as time wore on, it got down to about approximately 20 regular participants over the course of the meetings. So after the fall of 2019 piece of the timeline, there's a kind of implementation piece of this work. So in fall of 2019, those recommendations would be shared with the board. We continue to do some internal operation work of maximizing credit recovery options. District staff would begin some of that infrastructure work based on the plan that was approved. And beginning to implement that plan in the spring of 2020, and then knowing that accountability was coming, and I apologize, I did a typo, for the class of 2021, not the class of 2020. We got a 2-year waiver. But then there was a slight deviation from that timeline. So even though the initial scope of work didn't really call it an exact number of meetings, it did call for 2 meetings in the spring, meetings in the summer, and then left up to the decision of the committee to continue to meet. So I would think probably 6 to 8 meetings is what the initial group was told. All in all, that group met a total of, I believe, 14 times. And these were pretty long meetings. We're talking about 2-hour meetings. But after the 10th meeting, and we started to talk about the plan for presenting to the board, sharing it with Dr. Watts, I forgot in the initial timeline presentation to the board that previous spring that there would be board elections. And so we talked about what might be the right time to bring this to the board. Even though it called for a fall presentation, the committee determined that it wasn't in the best interest of the plan and the district to present the plan to a board and then have to reacclimate recently elected board members to that plan and kind of do the presentation twice. So at that time, they decided that they would wait until those board members took office in January of 2020 and then do the presentation then. And then what's listed here is kind of the other piece that was decided in this too, was that what was the appropriate venue to bring this to the board. And given the breadth and depth of the work and the time that it took, we felt that a presentation wasn't going to be enough time to go through this, that they wanted a work session. And I think that's appropriate. And you see kind of what transpired in those first work sessions of your collective work as a board in 2020. And then, of course, after March 11th, 2020, COVID happened. So that kind of took precedence over this. And it also has some impact on the plan, and you'll see that in just a few minutes. But before I get into that, I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions or comments? Okay. So the committee reviewed, so based on the districts to learn from, they decided to take a look at the current school day schedule in Kent School District for high schools, our comprehensive high schools, and decided to use time as the variable of adjustment to help students, similar to the other 3 districts. So how could they change the school day to help students meet those core 24 requirements? So they consider options for students to obtain more credits, have more schedule flexibility, and provide more elective options and participation for students. They had a very robust discussion about the impact of schedule changes on students, family, and staff. So for example, adding 25 minutes to a high school day to add a 7th period doesn't just change the schedule for a high school student. It changes the schedule for the middle schoolers. It changes the schedule for the elementary schoolers because it changes the busing schedule, changes the transportation schedule. So that is an impact on the entire community. And so they looked at pros and cons of that. They looked at national research. They looked at what other districts in the state were doing. They looked at what might be the benefits of that, what might be the training needs of all of those schedule changes to help staff prepare for that at all levels. And they talked about what was important in the school day. What they really wanted was this idea of kind of schedule flexibility was a core value for the group, meaning that they wanted students to have the time to be exploratory learners and take advantage of electives, as well as meet the the traditional academic requirements of Core 24. And so based on that, they identified one bell schedule shift that appeared to address student needs and meet their scope requirements and cause the least disruption. And so I'm going to show you that schedule now. Please know that this was a real thing. This is the best representation, graphic representation of what that schedule was. And so what they talked about and ended up, I apologize, talked about and ended up with was what we call a 4x4x2 block with 7 periods in a day, 7 periods over the course of a week, and a flex block. So I'm going to break that apart for you. So they wanted to have 7 periods because that would allow students to have and kind of bank an extra credit if they needed to. So it allowed a student to be, if they were unsuccessful in a course the first go round, to have an opportunity to make that up and still remain on track with 4 years. So that was the importance of a 7th period. They also wanted a flex period because flex was the opportunity to have that advisory period, to get in social emotional learning, to try to work in possibly things like clubs and activities during the school day. So it could be intervention, it could be enrichment, it could be running start. Flex was truly going to be some of that support space. And so then the 4x4x2 piece of that was that it would extend the class time on those days. So a student would not go to all 7 periods in one day. They would go to 4 periods each day. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then Wednesdays would alternate. Because Wednesdays we would hold, we kept the assumption that we would hold our traditional Learning First Wednesdays early release. So we tried to work that into the general plan. So very, very, very big adjustment. But it seemed like this was starting to catch on. The group had reached consensus around this, and we started talking about it with the district staff. And then the more the committee continued to talk about this idea, they went back to kind of their core and what kept kind of gnawing at them and kept them engaged in what this was at its heart. We started to have more discussions, not so much about the academic attainment of Core 24 and pursuing a belief that students didn't have opportunities to obtain enough credits, rather than students needed the opportunity and the space to be successful in the credit the first time around. And so what would that look like, and how could we create that space for almost real-time remediation or real-time support? And so that's, so they kept kind of, teetering back and forth between that idea and those core beliefs. And then how do you do that without adding a 7th period, without creating a block schedule? How do you do that? And that's why the block was appealing, because they thought, well, if they had longer time in a day to delve more deeply into the topic, maybe that would help. But a block schedule doesn't mean you get to move more slowly through the topic and more methodically. You actually have to move more quickly because you have to get twice as much content done because you see them fewer times during the week. So that wasn't challenge free. So where the committee finally landed was this piece about removing barriers, the other barriers that contributed to credit deficiency. Sometimes external factors. So our students have other commitments. For our students, it's not their only job. How could we provide those cultural, social, emotional, environmental skill supports? And so they landed on this space where they wanted to expand the school's offerings into the community and keeping the school at the heart of that. And so what that looks like is a community school model. So a school as a hub. And so that seems counterintuitive. And so how do you do that if you don't expand the school day, if you don't change the schedule? Well, our buildings pre-COVID would sit empty and dark most evenings unless there was an event. And so how could we, as a district, open up our schools to provide these additional supports outside of the school day? So what would it look like if our schools became community hubs where students could get credit recovery opportunities after school outside of the school day? They could provide mental health, social emotional supports, and mentoring and tutoring. We could provide healthcare clinics, college access support, childcare. So for some of our student parents who need supports to pursue some of these things, so they don't do them and participate in clubs and all that after the day because they don't have that provided. But in addition to that, how could we provide adult supports for our community? How could we engage our community partners in supporting this work? And so the community school model is a national model, and it's slightly different. So this is not communities in schools. It's a slightly different model in that because it happens outside of the school day. And it is about utilizing the school space and inviting the community in, community partners in, programs in, to have the school become a living, breathing force within the community, not just during the traditional school day, but after hours as well. And so here's some examples of community schools in action. So I'm going to exit out of this really quickly, and I'm going to share my screen. I've already got them pulled up so that you can see examples of what this looks like. So all of the links will be live in the presentation. So all can see that. So I just started with New York City schools. And so they are a very large district, but they have a community school model, and their community school model focuses on whole child and the child's family. And they did a really simple website, but talks about the different courses, talks about, this is their entire community school site. But what kind of things happen in a community school environment? So arts programs, sports, music lessons, book clubs. It's not all just academic content and credit recovery. And it's not all just targeted at high school. So a community school model serves all levels. And so they provide healthy student choices for healthy student options, mentor options as well. LA County, I think we have a few minutes. I think the video is like a minute and a half long. So I think we can do their video. They do a really nice job of and you probably can't hear that because I'm on my headphones.
So that is LA counties, that's New York's. Here's a different model. And the beauty of a community school model is that it is tailored to the community. So even within a school district, the offerings, the course pieces would look different. So here's another district's example. And in this particular district, they use their high schools as a hub. And so each high school has a community school that operates and serves the elementary and middle schools in that feeder pattern. And you can see the list of schools that they serve. You list their community school hours. So they are Monday through Friday from noon to 8 p.m., Fridays from 7 a.m. to 3, Saturdays and Sundays as needed. And it's a variety of things offered, SAT and ACT classes, tutoring, adult ESOL courses, voter registration, and then a series of after-hour events. And the calendars were particularly helpful prior to COVID because now there are not live things that are happening because our schools are not open. Here's a different high school in that same school district. Their focus seems to be a little bit different. So they are doing driver's education, again, SAT, ACT prep, and even adult defensive driving courses. And then here's a third model there. And so they are focusing on driver's education, again, SAT, ACT, and a series of adult and youth classes, game night even, and a DJ. So what is there and what is offered depends on the needs of the community. And it serves all in addition to some of those credit recovery, mentoring and tutoring session opportunities as well. So all of that was wonderful. The committee was very excited about the idea of schools as a hub, and it allowed our community partners, it allowed experts in certain areas, it allowed parents and families to spend more time together, engaged in the work, becoming active participants in KSD outside of the school day, and utilizing all of those benefits, partnering with our city partners, our health departments to provide these services across the board. And hoping, like in the video from LA County, that these supports and system shifts would provide better access for students, better academic outcomes, because it would remove some of those barriers, some of those external pulls on students so that they can't focus on academics during the school day. And then COVID hit. Not so much that it prevented us from talking about it, but it definitely changed the reality of allowing people into a school. And so our entire plan for Core 24 for KSD was designed around this kind of open access model after the school day. And that is difficult to plan for when our schools right now are not even open for traditional instruction, let alone the idea of having a health clinic or adult classes and coursework or student credit recovery. And so again, it's not that the plan isn't viable, it's just what shifts will need to be made once we are a little further along in addressing COVID as a nation. And so right now, what that means for Core 24, what it meant for the class of 2020, which technically was a Core 24 statewide accountability graduating class. The state board made a series of rule adjustments for the class of 2020 due to COVID. Not necessarily intending to impact Core 24 and the requirements, but because of the pandemic. Believing that at that time we would be through this and it would impact the class of 2020. Now that we are living in this and we are seeing and thinking about impacts, not just for the class of 2021, but high school students who are credit attaining at all grade levels. Right now, there are not any rule changes as of yet or adjustments for the classes of 2021 or forward due to COVID. But I know that that is something that is under consideration with the Washington State Board of Education. And OSPI has not made any shifts as well around that idea. So for right now, I would say that the plan that the committee worked on is on pause until we have additional information about how we could actually implement and operationalize this idea. Because they were very excited about it. I think it would be, and they thought it would be a wonderful thing for the community as well as the students. It's just the viability of that right now. In the meantime, I think what that means for KSD is that we go back to leveraging the existing strategies for students and focusing there to ensure that the supports we have in place around credit recovery, around leveraging policy and state level decisions and waivers to continue students on the path of meeting Core 24. And then for those who want to know more about community schools, there are a series of links around community school research from national institutes about how this is working across the nation in several schools, not just the districts that were listed on the initial site. So I apologize. It doesn't leave a whole lot of time for questions, but there are a few minutes, but that's the full scope, breadth, and depth of the proposal and plan. And that's where we are right now. And so at some point post-COVID, we would like to bring back to you a transition or a modified version of this, of what it could look like moving forward.
Dr. Harmon, I think it'll be important to work with our community college partners, because a lot of those things that I see on that list, not a lot, but some of the things are already being provided there in the community colleges. And I know we used to have a good partnership with Green River and Highline. I don't know if it still continues, but I would be interested in hearing how we're partnering with them.
Yes, and so I would suggest in leveraging those partnerships that we invite them into our buildings, because the beauty of the community schools model is that the families don't have to travel as far, that it is something that's more local to them. So it's a great idea to encourage that, but keeping it community is at the heart of this.
Sure, understood.
Dr. Harmon, I'd just like to add that I served on the Core 24 committee, and some of the most wonderful conversations I had, and you have presented exactly, in my memory, of exactly what took place, pretty down to the core of how we operated and how we got to where we were. So I do appreciate your hard work on that. So.
Well, I mean, the team did lots of hard work. That committee worked really hard. And like I said, the goal in this was just to honor what they'd come to, and why it wasn't moving further wasn't because of lack of interest. It's just a pandemic shifts the viability of what we're able to do right now with this proposal.
Thank you, because I'm the one who asked to find out where this was going, because we've gotten a lot of requests from some of the committee members for a long time. One thing that struck me, I really appreciate it because it's very in-depth and it taught me a lot, and that's what I was looking for. So you met that expectation. One thing that really struck me is that slide where it showed what work sessions we had instead of talking about Core 24. So my concern as we look at that is flexibility and scheduling and things like that, because we talk about the calendar being a fluid object, but it doesn't seem that it is if other things, this is impactful. This impacts all our high school students. Anyone who's in high school right now, this impacts all of them. And that's very important to me that we're addressing their needs and making sure that they do succeed in Core 24. So like I said, I appreciate it. You met all my goals. I understand fully what the committee came to, but that was my wondering, is how flexible we really are with our schedule, our meeting schedule.
And I apologize. I should have spent a little bit more time on that slide. There were two that were timely there. The
Mhm.
bargaining one, because we were getting ready to go at that time pre-COVID into a
Right.
full opener with KEA.
Mhm.
And being a new board, you needed to understand what that meant in your role. And then the other was, I think, the highly capable and the school improvement plans or annual requirements as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So of the 5, I think 3 absolutely probably had to happen in the time frame that they were there. And so you're right in terms of building in space and flexibility. And I apologize, we're at 6:30, so I'm going to stop.
Okay.
And I hate to break up such a great conversation, but it is 6:30 and we do have probably, as usual, a very full agenda for our executive session. So I'm going to say that we're going to adjourn this work session for an executive session to discuss with legal counsel representing the district litigation or potential litigation to which the district is likely to become a part.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
I just wanted to see if my audio was working.
Always good to check.
Yeah.
A little weird on here. I'm on the phone because I gotta get the computer to get worked on. So it's like really hard. Everything's so small.
You sound fine.
You do.
I do.
Yeah, I
I'm
can.
good. Okay.
Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. And I am going to call the regular board meeting to order. I'm wondering if we need to wait for just a few more seconds here for a couple participants to come into the room. We've been on other meetings and we're back into the regular session. I hope the audience will give me some grace tonight. This is my 7th hour of being online for educational issues, so I'm a little tired. Do I see Dr. Watts? Not yet. Oh, there he is. Okay. All right. We're ready to rock and roll. Good evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting to order, and I would like to first call on Vice President Daniels to say the pledge.
Absolutely. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice President Daniels. And I'd like to welcome all our audience tonight. I know you have several things that you could be doing tonight, but choosing to be involved in caring about our community and our kids and our schools, which are your schools and your community. So I'm very glad to have you tonight. I'm very, very pleased tonight that Mr. Warren King George, the historian for the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe, has agreed to be with us again this evening. And we're going to try to not only do a land acknowledgement, but also have, really develop a relationship with the government entities and between the Muckleshoot and ourselves, not just to make it a check the box, but that we're here to work together and learn together and grow together. So now, without further ado, I'd like to have Mr. Warren King George, the historian for the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe, to read our land acknowledgement. Thank you, Mr. George.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's good to see you folks again. I'm grateful and thankful to be able to open this meeting along with you. I want to share just a few words first before I go into the statement. On behalf of my family, on behalf of my traditional teachers, I would like to thank you for this this show of respect, for this acknowledgement, for this invitation, and I think it's a wonderful gesture on your part, and literally putting your hand out for a handshake and introducing yourselves to your neighbors, being the Muckleshoot people. And so I gladly accept your handshake and in return. And I I firmly believe that we're on our way to a very good relationship. And I really encourage you to keep moving forward with your endeavor, to keep moving forward with all the good things that you're doing and the examples that you're setting, which this is one. On both sides, from both entities, from both governments. And I truly believe that this would make one day a great model for students, for all governments at every level, from the city all the way up to the federal level. This is a great, I guess, a great teaching tool for everyone. So I'm grateful and thankful. So first of all, I'd like to do it, a little bit of it in my traditional language. So bear with me. I'm going to use the traditional language of the Muckleshoot people, the Lushootseed. And so, so just a few words in my language, and then I'm going to use the English to read, to share a statement with you. Okay. Hat slacheel desyayat ti slacheel hat. So I want to thank you for this day. I want to thank you for this work. And I'd also like to thank you for what you are about to do and what you've been doing on behalf of the Muckleshoot tribe. I want to read to you, share with you now this statement that has been prepared for this evening. We acknowledge we are gathered upon the ancestral lands of the federally recognized Muckleshoot Indian tribe, who historically lived throughout the areas between the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound, what is known as the Salish Sea. Muckleshoot is party to both the Medicine Creek and Point Elliott treaties. These treaties reserve governmental rights to the Muckleshoot people and recognize their usual and accustomed territory. They hunt, they fish, gather, trade, govern, and live. These areas include Zidlalich, what is now known as the city of Seattle and surrounding region. Today, Muckleshoot celebrates and honors their culture by practicing and preserving their traditional language and heritage. They're also educating their youth and providing housing, healthcare, elders programs, veterans resources, and many other vital programs to their membership. As the second largest employer in South King County, Muckleshoot directly or indirectly supports thousands of jobs in this region and spends millions of dollars annually on hundreds of charitable and community contributions. Muckleshoot remains a strong sovereign nation and are invaluable contributors to our state, history, identity, economy, and culture. And with that, my dear people, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of the sentiment of our membership. I want to thank you for putting your best foot forward. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you real soon on other projects that grow along with our relationship, that go along with our endeavors to help the people and help the children. So with that, my dear people, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. King George. And I'm excited about this more in-depth partnership that we'll walk along in a journey and each of us can contribute. And we want to make whatever we do in our district, not just to check the box, that we're actually going to walk with you and you can teach us and we can teach you and we can learn and grow together and eat and all the good stuff where community development happens. So thank you again for your generosity of being with us again tonight. I appreciate that very much. And I would like to welcome all of you again. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meeting Act. And I'm going to read the process for audience participation. The purpose of the board meeting is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from the audience. Those wishing to comment must complete the online form as indicated on the district website and BoardDocs. There will be 2 periods where public comment will be heard at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. Questions raised through submitted public comment addressing an issue may require further investigation, and staff will contact you to follow up. If you indicated a desire to speak to an agenda item, your comment will be read at the portion of the agenda. General comments tonight will be read during the audience communications sections of the agenda. And I do want to apologize tonight because I was alerted by one of our students and another one of our community members that our line was down this morning when they tried to make, or last night when they tried to make it. I did double check it this morning when I got those emails. There was some technical problems, but we have corrected it. So we do appreciate you letting us know when things are not working, and we'll get it right. So with that, I'd like to turn and ask on the agenda review. I'd like to ask Dr. Watts if there are any changes to the agenda.
Thank you, President Hamada. Please note there are no changes to tonight's agenda.
Okay, now we're on to 2.01, preliminary communication from the audience. Ms. Howley, would you be so kind to read up to 30 minutes of the comments received?
Yes, President Hamada, members of the board, Dr. Watts, we have 8 public comments this evening, and I will read them in the order they were submitted on our website. The first comment is from Najib Farah. And Najib says, what is the plan to help the families that have lost their homes and jobs due to the pandemic and are struggling to have online learning for their kids? Should more of the budget be spread to help struggling students? How would you start to support those that are having a hard time with the new learning environment? The next comment is from Diego Ortiz. And I believe both of these comments so far are students. Diego says, as we all know, seniors are required to complete a high school and beyond plan in order to graduate. Filling out this information on my school data may be easy for some students, but can be difficult for others, especially those who work best by having one-on-one conversations and/or are visual learners. What can the district do to ensure seniors get the help they are seeking when it comes to the high school and beyond plan? Perhaps a location for each high school where students can go to get help. The next comment is from Eunice Barr. And Eunice says, Dear Board of Kent, my complaint is that online schooling isn't working as effectively as it should because teachers are assigning too much homework. Since teachers don't see what kids are doing in other classes because they aren't on campus, they either assign too much homework or none at all. Now, I understand completely why students need vast amounts of homework to keep up with their grade level. but I feel like teachers should communicate with students and see if they have a heavy load so that they can properly prepare for that and swiftly execute ways of the students turning stuff in. The next comment is from Ria Kumar. And Ria says, has there been a mass number of students dropping out to do homeschooling? And if so, has this affected the school budget? Diana Palachuk, who is a student, says, to whom it may concern, thank you for allowing this opportunity to comment on this school board meeting. I would like to ask a couple of questions. Do you view bias within teaching as a potential concern in any way? If so, how will you go about minimizing political, ideological, etc. bias in e-learning and classroom settings? I have noticed this on multiple occasions through my 3 years at Kentwood. Number 2, keeping in mind recent developments in the COVID-19 pandemic, from a current perspective, how do you see the 2021 graduation taking place? What can we expect and how will it be different from this year's? Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Diana Palachuk. The next comment is from Reagan Yang. And Reagan says, regarding the distribution of school supplies, I am concerned about the students and parents who are unable to attend distribution days, either due to such as lack of transportation, high health risk, and busy schedules. Students and parents are unable to collect materials for classes. For some students, they cannot fully participate in class without these materials. With this in mind, are there alternative methods on how we can accommodate these students or distribute supplies? The next comment is from Kristen Hutchinson. Kristen says, I am one of the officers of Kentwood's National Honor Society, a chapter of the National Community Service Club. Due to the pandemic, there are fewer safe volunteer events for our members to help our community. Outside events with proper social distancing and mask wearing are the safest, but there are very few, if any, in our community. Kent schools have lots of areas for landscaping and general outdoor cleanup. When or how could we organize an outdoor cleanup event with the proper precautions to clean up our schools? Kimberly Remp says, some students live in harsh conditions such as abusive and toxic house environments. Due to this pandemic, we are forced to stay in our homes, but it may be very troubling for those students in these types of environments. What can we do for these students? President Hamada, that is the end of the comments for this evening. So I will not have any additional comments in the next section.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holly. I also received an email from Kevin Pham, I believe, that he wanted to make a comment tonight. You did contact him to tell him the system was working. He did not send on what he wanted to comment about, but we'd sure like to hear from our student, Kevin Pham, if he wants to contribute in the future. I do not have a copy of what he wanted to speak about, but I wanted to make sure that that was addressed tonight. Moving on, we're now up to, let's see, this 3.01, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Watts, would you like to give us your report, please?
Not only would I like to, but I will certainly provide Superintendent's report now. Thank you, President Hamada, and thank you, members of the board, staff, and community. This evening, I am so pleased to provide updates on our continued work, as well as our efforts as a team KSD. That we're working hard and smart to accomplish our mission and our vision for all of our students. See, Kent School District graduation rates continue to rise. The fact is that overall 2020 cohort graduation rate was 87.8% for the class of 2020 cohort. Students who entered high school in 2016 graduated within 4 years. And this equates to a 3.8% increase from the 2019 cohort graduation rate and an 8.1% increase from the 2015 cohort graduation rate. The graduation rate for our class of 2020 Black African-American students was 90.8%, which is an increase of 8.2% from the previous year. We also saw an increase for our Hispanic Latino students, who showed a 4.5% increase with a graduation rate of 81.4% for the class of 2020. We also recognize the gains that were accomplished for our inclusive education students, as well as our English language learner students. The class of 2020 inclusive ed students had a graduation rate of 63.3%, which is a 10.1% increase from the class of 2019. The class of 2020 English language learner students had a graduation rate of 72.2%, which is a 7.5% increase from the class of 2019. And to highlight one of our comprehensive high schools, Kent Lake saw the largest increase among our comprehensive high schools, with a graduation rate of 91.9% for the class of 2020, which constituted a 9.6% increase from the class of 2019. Now, our 2020 seniors faced unprecedented challenges, as we all remember and recognize. And yet this data confirms that their ability to persevere, to overcome, and to succeed. This data also shows the commitment of our students, our families, our staff, those who did not overutilize available waivers and prioritized student learning, even during this global health crisis. And while we celebrate these impressive gains for the entire student body, we must not, we cannot ever lose sight that specific student groups are still not achieving at the same rate. Now, we still have much work to do to ensure we are successfully preparing all students for their futures. All means each and every. However, it goes without saying that a hearty congratulations goes out to our students, to our families, to our staff, and our entire KSD community, who have played an incredible part and role in achieving our highest 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate in recent history. Now, in a year filled with challenges, anxiety, loss, it can feel good to pause and consider the things that we are grateful for. It can also be a time to consider those that require additional support and how we may be a resource in our community for others. Information, resources for Thanksgiving and Christmas meals, and toys and gifts are now available on the new 2020 Holiday Resources page on our website. Now, this page can be easily accessed from all KSD websites in several ways, and the information can also be translated. One of the easiest ways to access these resources is to click the 2020 Holiday Resources icon from any homepage, or you can hover over the word families, click the terms community resources, and then click the terms 2020 Holiday Resources from any web page on any site. Now, we could not do our work alone, and nor would we ever want to do it, but I want to thank the many partners and organizations that work with us year-round to support our students and our families and our staff. We appreciate you. We appreciate all that you do for us to ensure success for our students, staff, and families. Please continue to stay safe as you continue to provide support and resources for Team KSD. Now, while a traditional feast, end-of-year parties, and crowded tables are on hold right now due to COVID-19 activity levels and the current statewide restrictions, there are many things that we can celebrate remotely. In fact, this week, we celebrate American Education Week by honoring the dedicated individuals in this district who lead, administrate, support, and teach to help make a difference in our students' lives. Parents and caregivers are our partners in learning. Schools and families benefit from strong, respectful relationships where responsibility for student learning is also shared. See, our students and staff are lifelong learners, collaborating in a positive learning environment to achieve their best. Now, learning together makes us strong and creates resilient communities, and our school staff are dedicated professionals who know and value and care for all students. Technology has become a staple in this learning environment, and technology enables learning together anywhere at any time. And while there are many ways we can still improve remote learning, there is still much to celebrate about what we have been able to accomplish in such a short period of time while facing this pandemic together. Last week, we celebrated National School Psychology Week to highlight the critical work school psychologists and other educators do to help all students thrive. See, this year's theme is the power of possibility. Now, the word possibility implies hope, growth, resilience, and renewal. Possibility suggests that even something as small as a seed can grow into something magnificent. The word power implies that things can and will happen. When we focus on what is possible, we have hope that students will grow, thrive, and bloom. It is no small coincidence that our leaders chose this week to also be the week of KSD Wellness Week. In this time of COVID-19, paying attention to our social emotional well-being is critical for everyone, children and adults alike. We know that physical and mental wellness are very closely connected. Mental health plays a significant role in your ability to maintain good physical health. Each day this week, families, staff, and students have been participating in a new daily challenge, filling out a survey and uploading a photo or a comment about their challenge. Many have shared their experience on social media using hashtag KSD Wellness Week. And thank you to our school family support services and communications team for their efforts, our staff for modeling the way, and every student and family member who is participating. Finally, as we continue to celebrate Native American Heritage Month and prepare for the Thanksgiving holiday next week, please know that it's important to know this for many Native Americans, that Thanksgiving is a day of mourning and protest. For many Native Americans, Thanksgiving Day commemorates the arrival of settlers in North America and the centuries of oppression and genocide that followed after. May we, as members of KSD, committed to equity as a core value, remember to take the time this month to honor and remember the hundreds of thousands of Native Americans who lost their lives at the hands of colonialists and the genocide of entire tribes. And may we remember and celebrate the vibrant and powerful Native descendants, families, and communities that persist to this day throughout the culture, our community, and the country. In closing, I want to express during this Thanksgiving season how grateful I am for the time and the talent that our incredible educators share with our students and families. I wish to thank our teachers, our paraeducators, our school-based administrators, and our support staff, and our school board at each school, and our central office staff and leaders. I know you will continue to support our schools and district as members of the KSD community. And I appreciate all that you have done and will continue to do. I look forward to continuing to partner with our school board members, working together to realize our district's mission, vision, and living out our core values of equity, excellence, and community. Thank you for your continued partnership. This concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Watts. I'm going to take a point of privilege here to say, wow, those statistics are impressive. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you to our staff, our teachers, all the people, the parents, the kids. Everybody has to have a buy-in to this to make it work. And that's pretty staggering, 87.8%. And even more staggering that our kids of color in those statistics. And that is very dear to my heart. And I cannot thank all of our staff and with your leadership for achieving that. And I hope everybody in the community will recognize that, because that's quite something, and that is a gift.
Thank you, President Ahmad. It takes all of us.
Christmas came a little early this year, didn't
No,
it?
it's the gift that should keep on giving, and certainly support from the entire team. We could not do this work without the support of our students, staff, and families. And I just thank them. And we still have work, a great deal of work left to be done. It's a milestone. We're certainly proud of that accomplishment thus far.
Thank you, Dr. Watts, and miles to go before we sleep, right?
Hills to climb, mountains to climb. That's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're
Please.
on to 4.01, our legislative update. And now I'd like to call on Director Vengadassalam to give her legislative report.
Thank you. I just have a few things today. The OSPI has filed an emergency rule updating the definition of absence for the 2021 school year. So there are some key updates there on their website that talks about the non-truancy remote learning absence period is extended until March 1st, 2021. And if you're interested in learning more about absences from remote learning, you can read up on the Washington Administrative Code, WACS 392-401A-020, to kind of see if absences are meeting the criteria in those WACs as excused absences. So that is one. And then let's see, we did have Congress provided funds to the local school districts to provide support in covering emergency COVID-19 costs. And so we have entered into internet service provider agreements. I see it's on our agenda down at the bottom to help our families, or OSBI is going to use the funding to reimburse school districts who've entered into their own agreements with the internet service providers. So that's happening. And then Governor Inslee's proclamation extends the statutory waivers and suspensions related to the OPMA until December 7th, 2020. And tomorrow will be the third of three meetings for school boards who were invited to share views with the House Education Committee. And I know Dr. Watts participated in the first one. I have been on my vacation on a road trip, so for the past week and a half. But I plan to attend tomorrow's meeting, and it is for the board superintendent teams. So I plan to sort of reiterate what we had considered as priorities for our legislative session that's upcoming. WASDA has released their 2021 legislative position priorities, and they identify three major categories, which are advancing the vital programs and services. So implementing the IEPs for students with disabilities, providing the necessary support to implement, I should say, improving the preparedness for early childhood and kindergarten programs, especially for children who are English learners and are in poverty, and then strengthening school safety by supporting services to and training to safeguard the social emotional health of students and staff. So advancing the vital programs, expanding access to equitable instruction. They're concerned about students prioritizing the funding of student digital needs. And many of these priorities very much align with what we considered our priorities as well. Advancing the policies that prioritize closing the opportunity gap to persistently underserved students. Reviewing the prototypical school model formula, we did talk about that, making sure it's aligning actual student and staffing needs. And then supporting the flexibility for students to graduate on time by allowing waivers and multiple pathways. And then finally, the third big category is the secure staff and district resources. We did prioritize this particular one, which was hold the line on basic education funding, especially enrollment and transportation, and prevent these mid-school year budget cuts. And then protecting the critical dollars for the delivery of equitable instruction, including local effort assistance, which, you know, is not something that I think falls under, or we fall under, but school districts like Federal Way will consider that a priority. And then also offering a safe harbor to districts during declared emergencies, that we're not liable for those particular emergencies. So those are the three big categories. And I will be joining tomorrow's session with the House Education Committee and invite anyone who else would like to join to register. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now on to 5.0, recognition, proclamations, 5.01, American Education Week. And I'd now like to call on Director Vinda Gosselin to read the proclamation.
All right. Our proclamation for American Education Week. I'm honored to read this. Whereas public education is the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young students with both academic and social growth, schools give them hope for and equitable access to a productive future. And whereas public education employees, be they teachers, guest teachers, higher education faculty and staff, custodians, administrators, bus drivers, clerical staff, food service professionals, skilled trade workers, health and student service workers, security guards, technical employees, librarians, education support professionals, or support staff or other support staff work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas public schools are the foundations of neighborhood and communities, bringing together parents and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders, and elected officials in a common purpose, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaims the week of November 16th to the 20th, 2020 as American Education Week in the Kent School District and urges all citizens to join in this observance. Signed this 18th day of November 2020 by the Board of Directors of the Kent School District and Dr. Watts. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now on to 5.02, National Native American Heritage Month. And I'd like to now call on Director Bowen to read that. Director Bowen. Unfortunately, I don't. Oh, Director Bowen, thank you. Would you like
Sorry.
to read?
Yes, I'm on the phone, so I'm trying to switch between everything. I apologize. It's kind of bumpy here, but let me pull that up and I'll start.
Thank you.
Kent School District Proclamation, National Native American Heritage Month. Whereas the history and culture of our great nation have been significantly influenced by America's Native Americans and Indigenous peoples. And whereas the contributions of America's Native American have enhanced the freedom, prosperity, and greatness of America today. And whereas their customs and traditions are respected and celebrated as part of a rich legacy throughout the United States. Whereas the Native American Awareness Week began in 1976 and recognition was expanded by Congress and approved by President George H. Bush in August 1990, designating the month of November as National American Heritage Month. National American Indian Heritage Month, excuse me. Proclamations under variants of the name, including Native American Heritage Month and National American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month, have been issued each year since 1994. And whereas in honor of the National Native American Heritage Month, community celebrations, as well as numerous cultural, artistic, educational, and historical activities have been planned. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaims the month of November as National Native American Heritage Month in the Kent School District and urges all citizens to join in this observance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bowen. We're now on to 5.03, National School Psychology Week. I'd now like to call on Director Bettinger to read that, if you would, please.
Thank you. Whereas one of Kent School District's goals is to prepare all students to be college and career ready by collaborating and consulting with staff and families on best practices that will help advance student achievement, and whereas school psychologists have expertise in mental health, learning, and behavior, which helps students succeed academically, behaviorally, emotionally, and socially, and whereas data assessments are collected through evaluations conducted by school psychologists by building rapport and trust with students, and whereas school psychologists help students develop their individual abilities to be self-regulated learners, which including setting individual learning goals, designing a learning process to achieve those specific goals, and assessing the results to determine if the goals were achieved. And whereas National School Psychology Week is an opportunity to raise public awareness of the importance of having psychologists present at each school to help all children and youth become the best students they can be. And whereas this year's theme is the power of possibility, which implies hope, growth, resilience, and renewed, and emphasizes the work of school psychologists to help students grow and thrive. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors proclaims November 9 through 13, 2020 as National School Psychology Week and urges all citizens to recognize the importance of school psychologists to guide this generation and provide future generations a better chance for success. Signed this 18th day of November 2020 by the Board of Directors of the Kent School District and Dr. Calvin J. Watts, Secretary to the Board.
Thank you very much. We're on to 6.0, our presentations. 6.01, 2021 budget updates. I'd like to now call on Dr. Watts to introduce our Executive Director, Ben Rarick, to begin his presentation. Dr. Watts.
Thank you, President Amata. And as we've mentioned, I would like to call on Executive Director of Budget and Finance, Ben Rarick, to provide information and a presentation on the 2020-2021 budget update. Ben, floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, board members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, it's good to be with you this evening. As you know, we've been on a journey the last few years, stemming back into 2017, where the district was in a precarious financial situation. And during those times, you were receiving a lot of information, almost every meeting, and in great detail. And we had talked about a journey in which we kind of changed the way that we engage the information in the budget scape. And so this is my attempt to do that. So this evening, you will be receiving a presentation that's different in form and structure than you've received before. this is kind of my shot at presenting information in a more, shall we say, user-friendly and less detailed manner. Appreciate any feedback, although this was done in collaboration with the citizens group. This is my rendition of it, and I fully expect that the citizens group will have suggestions and will kind of, it'll kind of evolve over time. So that's why I have labeled this a beta version. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And am I capturing that?
Not yet.
Are you seeing that?
Not yet, Ben.
No.
Is that working?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Trying to get it to go into full presentation mode here. Okay. So I'm calling this the Financial Health Indicators Dashboard, and this would be considered a beta version. It's a fair amount of work to put this together in addition to the monthly financial statement. And my vision of this is that it would probably be a little bit of an overkill to do it every month. So my thought about this is that these would be quarterly, but again, this is really built for the board and the community. So feedback on that would be welcome. First page is basically a flyover of 6 indicators, and I will go into each of these indicators in a little bit more depth. But the six indicators are fund balance, year-to-date expenditures, year-to-date revenues, our status on enrollment, our revenue to expense ratio, and a 6th that I will explain in greater depth, risk or risk assessment as I'm calling it. Okay. The first one is fund balance. So this one is I think the only one that you'll see registered in the far right green shade of the dial, indicating that we're in very strong shape in terms of our reserve levels, which is kind of part of our overall financial strategy as a district, that we know that we've possibly got some more challenging times ahead, which we'll be talking about here shortly. So I feel like we have a strong reserve built to withstand some short-term turbulence, if you will. We closed the year at 49.9 million unreserved, unassigned fund balance. And you'll be getting, for those of you who've been on the board for many years, you'll be familiar with the F-196, the annual financial statement. You'll be getting a copy of that at the next board meeting. And you can answer all the questions you have about year end. But this presentation here is a budget status update for the beginning of this school year. Okay. The second indicator is year-to-date expenditures, which I'm indicating to be kind of in the on track column. Okay. We are 14.7% of the way through our budget, and we're 16.67% of the way through the fiscal year. So you can see that we've spent a little bit less than what the period of time through the year would indicate, which is a good sign, meaning we're within budget kind of in a macro sense. The one thing I want to emphasize here, if you're taking notes or if you want a couple of takeaways, here's one thing to write down. That is that throughout the fall, the revenue picture, the revenues that you see in our financial statements are not going to be terribly helpful, because remember the state allocates us revenue based on our enrollment estimates, not based on our actual enrollment. And so when I say that expenditures are on track here, what that means is expenditures are on track based on the budget that the board adopted, right? At some point later in the year, we're going to need to kind of recalibrate our budget once we have settled into revenues that have adjusted for our enrollment. I still believe, given our strong reserves, that we're well positioned to handle that. But that kind of partially explains why that dial is kind of leaning a little bit towards the orange there, that we're certainly well within our budget right now, but we need to keep an eye on it as we reconcile to lower revenues. Indicator number 3 is revenues. So you're seeing revenues in the kind of the orange region of the dial for the following reason. Most of the revenue that we receive comes from the state, and most of the revenue that we receive from the state comes by virtue of our enrollment. And so because we have experienced a significant impact on our enrollment this year, we will experience revenue loss this year. So we budgeted for a certain amount of revenue. We will not realize all of that revenue. Again, I feel like we're well positioned to handle that, but it's just important for the board to understand that. So our revenue collection right now, the rate at which we're taking in money, is not really unusual to any previous year. I include it in the orange simply in recognition of the fact that we will experience a revenue loss as the enrollment numbers start to kind of settle into what they're really going to be for the rest of the year. Okay, and indicator 4 is enrollment. So even though this is kind of, this report is commensurate to the September financial statement, I'm cheating just a bit because I have more updated information, right? So I'm going to talk to you about the latest information we have through November. And that is that if you just took enrollment count data from November of last year and you took enrollment count data from November of this year, we are down 1,294 student FTE. That's a sizable number, but it's also important to understand that we're actually kind of right in the middle of where districts are in the region. Some districts have taken a larger hit as a percentage. Some districts have taken a smaller hit. We're actually right there, kind of in the middle band. But nevertheless, that's a sizable amount of revenue associated with that enrollment. So I indicate the enrollment in the caution area for the reason that just purely on the issue of enrollment, for as far back as I could see, we have not experienced an enrollment decline of that magnitude in the recorded history. I suppose all of our districts in the region could say the same thing. So we're all kind of going through the same thing together right now. And so the issue for enrollment really is that we're clearly, there are students who have left our district for a variety of different educational opportunities. The issue long-term is what the bounce back looks like in terms of when we return after the pandemic, when public health conditions improve such that we can all return to a bricks and mortar environment. Do we kind of restore to our previous enrollment levels or not? And that's an unknown at this point. Okay. You can see how these indicators start to build on one another because you end up kind of having shades of the same conversation. So here we've talked about revenues and we've talked about expenses, but this is the ratio, the revenue to expense ratio in any given year. Now, under normal circumstances, once you've achieved a reserve level that you're comfortable with, you generally want that to be about 1, right? 1.0, meaning you're spending just about the same amount you're taking in, give or take, on margins of error. And so that generally won't be the case this year, probably, again, not just for Kent, but probably all the districts in the region, as we are, I might even say through the state, although I can't necessarily say that, but certainly in the region, that because of the loss of enrollment, and because of the loss of revenue associated, it is quite likely that we will spend more than we will take in this year. And so that would put us in revenue to expense ratio of less than 1. Now, let me be clear, the reason that this is not in the bright red and is in the orange is that I think that is entirely appropriate for a 1-year transition where you're dealing with a situation like this. The issue would be long-term in terms of we would not want to stabilize into a revenue to expense ratio that is drastically less than 1. But this is clearly an unusual and we hope short-term situation. Okay, and then finally, the 6th indicator, kind of giving it a shot here. I felt like we needed something as part of this discussion that captures the unknown factors. So what we've reviewed in the first 5 indicators are the things we know in the moment, right? The other thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about are the things that we don't know yet in terms of how fraught is the future in terms of risk for our district or any organization for that matter. So I consider, given the fact that we're in the midst of a world pandemic, given the facts that we're experiencing some enrollment loss, that the kind of the risk environment is high. And that's why I've indicated the dial over at the end of the orange area. And I indicate that for 3 reasons. The first is that bounce back factor that we talked about in terms of not necessarily short term, but what are the long-term effects of enrollment on the Kent School District? How many of the students of those 1,294 students who left and are not enrolled will be re-enrolling? That is an unknown. It has a lot to do with where they are now, what option they went to. Was it homeschooling? Was it another online provider, etc.? Was it another state? And so that's a very significant risk factor for us long-term, as it would be in any district. The second thing is that I have been through this cycle before where when you're approaching an economic downturn, you can fully expect the legislature to aggressively pursue expenditure reductions at the state level. Given that public schools is, I think, still the single largest budget in the state budget, I fully expect to be somehow impacted by that. The extent of that impact is unknown. You heard Director Venkatachalam talk about the advocacy efforts. But I worked in the legislature during the last phase of an economic downturn on the heels of the subprime mortgage crisis. And there's only so many options available to the legislature to solve the financial problem that they are experiencing. And then the final is the persistence of the public health conditions in terms of how long we remain in this space, which is an unknown. The length of that obviously has an impact on the 2 previous things that we talked about. So I hope this was a kind of a higher level, more conceptual conversation that's more kind of board appropriate rather than boring into the minutia of data. I look forward to any feedback that you may have, and I look forward to any questions you may have about any that we discussed this evening.
And when we're talking about operational deficits, what are you considering? What are you considering a long term where we would be in an operational deficit, or short term?
Mm-hmm.
How are you defining it? Less than a year?
Yeah. So operational deficit is an ominous term, but just to know that all that means to me factually is a year where you spend more than you take in. I'm
sorry, can I clarify the question?
Sure.
I want to understand at what point would you feel when it comes to operational deficit when it goes into the negative ratio.
Yes.
At what point do you feel that it is going to go into the red zone and we would have to start taking some actions beyond
Sure,
looking
sure.
at funding
I understand.
balance?
My set of assumptions are that I'll be careful how I express this, because it has all sorts of assumptions about when we go back to school, and we don't know that, right? I don't want anybody's hopes up or hopes down, or I have been conceptualizing a financial strategy where we can use a combination of assumed lower expenses and use of reserves to withstand or endure a school year in which we are dealing with roughly what we're dealing with right now. And that if we finished this year with a negative expense ratio, that would not necessarily in and of itself be a problem. It could be strategic. Okay, so if we went into the next year, okay, and we were projecting another deficit spend in the following year, that would be kind of a totally different ballgame for me. So this is difference between a short-term strategy and a long-term. I'm sorry, it's my dog. Let me get my son to come get him. Just want to mute myself for a second. So I hope that answered your question, Director Vanderbussel.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Rarick, to piggyback on that question, is there any deviation in the dollar amount of the deficit reaching a certain point when you're comfortable with that? I mean, if it was larger than you projected, or would that create more of a problem for a one-term thing than you're talking to us about?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think if, you have seen year over year kind of how enrollment projects over a year, how it kind of, there's a smooth curve that happens every year, and we've overlaid each year, or, year after year after year, and it kind of looks the same every year, right? Mm-hmm. This year we can see that it's starting not to look the same. For example, we typically have enrollment increase from September to October and October, November. We didn't see the increase that we typically see. We held, but we didn't see an increase. If I started to see a completely different shape in the spring, where we kept losing students, for example, mm-hmm. And I couldn't project out a line that was like, okay, here I have a relative comfort level that I know what kind of revenue we're going to have for the year, that would be cause for kind of a, to use the football parlance, have to call an audible at that point. But we have 3 months of enrollment, and I think I can see a rough trend coming where I'm like, I have a reasonable sense that I know what the revenue picture will be for this year. And I have faith that unless something else, I mean, we have another pandemic or, not to be flippant, but if something unknown intervenes, obviously we can't speak to that, but that would be kind of the trigger, I would say, that would cause a more kind of abrupt approach. But the benefit here is that we have built a, we need to take a moment to recognize the fact that, we're right there with our peers now in terms of the Tacomas and the Bellevues and the Lake Washingtons. We have the same level of reserves now. So we're not in a panic, month to month situation now. This is why you have a fund balance, so that you can survive these sorts of, one-time events. and maintain some program continuity. So that's really the tremendous, if there's a celebration in all of this kind of difficult conversation, it's that we could be in a very different situation, which some districts are in, which is that revenue means the ability to stay liquid or not. And that's not what it means for us this year.
And you are not anticipating, from your history of working in Olympia somewhat, and what you've seen with legislatures in recovery periods under certain circumstances, you're factoring in a dollar amount that is somewhat reasonable, even if they make legislative adjustments to our budgets. That is, you already have some of that in there, right? But not,
Yeah.
and you don't see that they could go kind of I mean, I'm hearing that the deficits aren't quite as much as they thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
But anything
I
can
have,
happen. So
I have made some of those assumptions.
yeah.
And I think that they're reasonable and educated assumptions. And
Yeah.
to put a bottom line to it, it would be that under those conditions, we would definitely spend more than we take in this year. We would definitely use some of our reserves in a strategic way, but it wouldn't necessarily impair our ability to maintain continuity in future years.
Do we have a line item budget on our budget that I'm not aware of that actually speaks to our work with equity? Is it a line item budget for equity work?
Line item for equity. I'd have to think about that. There's not a line that says equity. I mean, it's more like equity work that is occurring in each of the communities, you know? We don't centralize a budget for equity per se.
All right, thank you.
And I'm sorry, go ahead,
No, go ahead.
Director Bettinger.
No, that's
just quick question. When you talked about the calibration, are we looking at like spring after we get our tax funds, or did you set a timeline on that?
Yeah, so I'm not, I foreshadowed that a little bit in the document, but I haven't made now I'm not prepared at this point to say that I will definitely be recommending a revised budget. It just, there's a lot that still needs to kind of unfold.
Okay.
Part of the issue, you know, when the board adopts a, they're effectively giving us a total dollar amount to stay within.
Yeah.
And we're not going to exceed that dollar amount. That's really not the issue.
Okay.
I kind of have to make a decision as to whether or not it would just make more sense to restate the budget given the large magnitude of enrollment drop. So I'm going to process that with leadership and make a recommendation at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In preparation for last week's meeting and this meeting, I was looking at the September financial statement. I know I asked this question via email, and I also asked it on, I think, May 13th. It's that $9 million assigned fund balance. And then I was looking at our policies about fund balances. And so assigned fund balance is amounts are determined by management and approved by the superintendent. So again, I'm just wondering what that is that for? What is that $9 million assigned balance? What is that? What has been approved by the superintendent? What is that fund balance, that assigned fund balance for?
Okay, I got a lot of things open on my screen. If you just give me a minute, I'll pull that up.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go over some of this during the F196 next month, but in deference to your question, Director Bettinger, I'm happy to answer it now. Basically, you've got two types of reservations, if you will, in the fund balance. Some of them are called assignments, which are ones that are done by management. and some of them are done reservations, which is where you have an account where you can only spend the money for a certain thing. It's like categorical in nature, and they allow you to carry over a certain amount. Well, if you have extra in that account, that's fund balance, yes, but it's fund balance that can only be used in that category, if that makes sense. So like LAP would be an example. So
So
you-
LAP is
you
an
asked-
example. So LAP would be an example of a restricted fund balance.
Correct. So you asked, I'm just for the broader board understanding the two different parts, you asked about the assignments.
Mhm.
And was $9.2 million of assignments. Okay.
Mhm.
1.9 million is assigned because it is not strictly unreserved, but it kind of is similar in the sense that school budgets have school carryover. And to the extent that they have carryover, we want to earmark it and keep it separate because we know they're going to spend it eventually. Like a lot of the schools are spending that money this year because it's the last year we're allowing school level budget carry forward. So 1.9 million is for carryover in school-based budgets. 2.3 million was for apropos to last week's conversation. That is our calculation of our compensated absence liability at this point. So there's a complicated methodology that the accounting team goes through to determine what's an appropriate amount to determine for an assignment of fund balance. And to your question, Director Bettinger, the action that the board took last week would kind of interact with that calculation, right? So this calculation happened at the year end, right? And then our cash out policies would influence how much remains on the books from a liability standpoint. We have maintained at smaller amounts, two items, $2.5 million for what is generally described as implementation of the school district reboundary study and the new school. So next year, and that is not a scientific amount of 2.5 million, but a reasonable estimate of, we understand that we're opening up in this new school. We are conceivably reconfiguring grades or not. I mean, there's a lot of on the table, right? Just opening up a new school and creating a new school budget will have costs to us. Some of the costs will kind of reallocate across buildings, but some of them will be new costs, right? So we assigned 2.5 million to that. It could be more, it could be less, but that's kind of a reasonable estimate of that cost. The last amount is $2.5 million, which is generally described as our ongoing implementation of secondary school redesign, which included but was not limited to the high school graduation requirements and course enhancements. That work continues to be ongoing. Again, the 2.5 million is not a scientific number in that regard, but in discussions with my supervisor, it was a prudent thing to consider that we may have additional costs down the road in regards to those initiatives. That gets you to roughly the 9.2. Now, right. The difference between that and the total fund balance is those reservations for categorical funds.
Okay, and so that was last year, or that's last year and this year?
Everything we're talking about right now is year-end close fiscal year 20.
Mm-hmm. And when did fiscal year 20 close?
It closed officially like last week. So the process basically is you go through August, right? August is your last month. You spend September and the first part of October assembling your year-end financial statements, your notes, everything that's associated with what you send to OSPI. The deadline for OSPI is like, the third or fourth week in October. ESD does a review, and then the final submission is, maybe a couple of weeks ago.
And so are we going to be carrying over in assigned fund balance that same amount?
Can you say that again, please?
Are we going to be carrying over that same amount in assigned fund balance for the next fiscal year? 9.2?
Are we going to be carrying over?
Or are
the
we
same
going to
amount
have,
next year?
do we have that amount in assigned fund balance for this fiscal year?
Yeah, so I can't, so unless I'm misunderstanding your question, obviously I can't predetermine the future. You're asking me what our next year close would be. I would say I would not expect the school level carryover to be the same. If I've already, that number is going to change. The compensated absence number changes a little bit every year, just because that's kind of based on, so things will change.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any further discussion?
That's all I have for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric. Appreciate it.
I like the dashboard a lot.
Sure.
I think I sent this in an email too. If we could, just for transparency for the community, if we could go backwards in time and also populate it for the past 5 years so we can kind of see. So then, part of going forward and making sure we're being accountable, I think, is to be able to look at the past and see, where things were in the past so we can, know the warning signs potentially and things like that. So that is something that I would request and hope that, that we could provide that, because I think that would be a very good visual to see where we came from, where we are now. And, if we could do that, I would appreciate it.
Again, thank you very much, Mr. Eric, for your insight there. Appreciate the work. And I too really like the dashboard. I think it's really good. So we're now on to 7.0, Board of Directors discussion and approval. 7.01 is the superintendent's annual goals and key performance indicators. I would like to ask a member to make a motion.
I'll move to approve agenda item 7.01, superintendent's annual goals and key performance indicators.
A second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to approve the superintendent's annual goals and key performance indicators. Discussion. Hearing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of 7.01 signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions. The motion carries. We're on to 7.02, resolution number 1596, certification of special levy. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve resolution number 1596, certification of special levy.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve resolution number 1596, certification of special levy. Discussion.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand this fully. I've read the documents. So essentially, we're going to be getting less from the levy than we anticipated, yes?
No, I don't think I would say it that way. This is about where I thought we would be. I think you're reacting to the fact that it's slightly less than the amount that was put before the voters. So what's going on there is that because at any point in time, we don't know what annual property values will be. And because Kent's situation was a little unique in that we're trying to hit a tax rate. Remember, our levy campaign was based on a tax rate. We wanted to make sure that if property values continued at the very high annual rate that they did in the 5 previous years, like we used a 5-year rolling average, which as I recall was in excess of 10%, that we would have the ability to claim that revenue if it stayed that hot. I was not at all surprised that it didn't stay that hot, and I was kind of projecting that it wouldn't stay that hot. So in effect, what we're doing is preserving our options, and that by certifying the 67.8, that is our best estimate. It's always an estimate, I want to say. The board needs to understand that we don't really know the final values when we set these rates. So we're trying to hit $3.84 right on the money, but in reality, it's going to be, pennies either way. So no, it's not actually less than what I was anticipating. It's pretty darn close.
Great, thank you.
And that's factored in with present projections for property values. Is that correct, Mr. Varick?
Yes, Madam Chair. The county is projecting approximately 5% growth. And so our running, I think it was a 3-year, 5-year, well, it was at least a 3-year average, was up over 10. So that explains the difference. But again, I was not at all surprised that it didn't stay with the 3-year average, and we were certainly prepared for that.
And do I understand we have a choice on this, or we have to follow what we put out there on that?
We do have a choice, and that is in effect why districts go through this process. Just keep in mind that you have a choice, but you kind of already foreshadowed your choice when you went out to the community with your levy campaign. So not all districts take the approach that we took, which is to say that we're going to try to keep your tax rate constant, right? And that was a major kind of pillar of the messaging of the campaign. And because we foreshadowed that, we had essentially, in good faith, are indicating that we will certify an amount that's consistent with that tax rate once we know what property values are going to be. You do have the option. I certainly wouldn't recommend it, but you legally have the option to certify to the full amount.
Right, and actually in good public relations right now, with what's going on in our community, a lot of our people possibly losing their homes or losing their jobs. Being of good faith and keeping to what we said is a very good public relations and fiscally sound message to the community. I believe that's correct, Mr. Eric. Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I will call for a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions? The motion carries. We're on to 7.04. I'll entertain a motion.
7.03.
Oh, excuse me. Jetted right over that one.
That's okay. I move that we approve agenda item 7.03, resolution 1597, out of endorsement waivers.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve resolution number 1597, out of endorsement waivers. Discussion.
I just have a question because it came up in an email to the board. All the out of endorsement waivers on this list, is this their first year they're getting an out of endorsement waiver? Or do they get these waivers for multiple years? And if they get them for multiple years, when can we anticipate that they will get their endorsement?
Good evening, President Hamada, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Holly. Yes, it is possible that teachers in this situation can be granted out of endorsement waivers for more than 1 year. We currently have 35 people that are on the list of out of endorsement waivers that are currently working in some sort of program or certification to get the waivers to support the work that they're doing in the classes that they're teaching. There's a lot of contributing factors to this. The middle school, Core 24 in the middle school. So we have teachers that are K endorsed that are teaching maybe a 9th grade high school credit bearing class at the middle school level. We've got several hard to fill positions in the district where whether it be our dual language program, special education programs, where we have to find specific people with skills, but maybe don't have the exact certifications. And so then once we have found people to fill those positions, then we're able to support them by making sure they get into the correct coursework to gain those certifications in a timely manner. Specifically, the one that you spoke of that you received an email on prior to the board meeting, that person has completed their endorsement, just recently completed their endorsement, and is qualified to teach the course that he is teaching. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, and each year, HR and our professional development support each of our teachers that fall in the out of endorsement waiver category. And you know, in each year, they depends on how many there are, because some years are a little bit better than others in filling some of those more challenging positions.
Thank you.
Dr. Behringer, are there any limitations or best practices for years for people to get these special endorsements? Is there a state requirement within so many years or anything like that? Or I'm not aware of it. Could you help educate me?
I wish I could speak to something specifically. There is a WAC that speaks to providing exceptions to the classroom teachers who don't have certificates or certifications or endorsements in the specific area they might be teaching in. But it doesn't, to my knowledge, speak to how many years they have. Now, I know it's a practice within HR and the Kent School District to work diligently and quickly to support those teachers to get the endorsements they need, requirements that they need, so they are whole as quickly as we can.
So in your opinion, 35 is not unusual?
This being my first year, I couldn't tell you if that's any different than any previous year. I would imagine that when you think about nearly 2,000 teachers in the school district, 35 is probably a pretty small number considering the hard to fill positions that we have each year.
Thank you. That's kind of what I was looking at percentage wise, but I just wanted to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Seeing no more discussion, I'm going to call for a vote on 7.03. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions? Director Bowen, was that an abstention?
No.
Okay.
I was late to the party.
Would you mind just, because I saw it come way late, were you voting nay or?
Yes.
You were voting yes. Okay. Just want to make sure we clarified that. Okay.
Yeah. I realized I was on mute.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I just want to make sure we got it right. Thank you for clarifying. The motion carries. All right. We're on to 7.04, approval of qualified interlocal governmental purchasing cooperative agreements. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve agenda item 7.04, approval of qualified interlocal governmental purchasing cooperative agreements.
A second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve of the qualified interlocal governmental purchasing cooperative agreements. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions? The motion carries. We're on to 7.05, and that's Windermere Foundation Grant. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve item 7.05 Windermere Foundation Grant.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the Windermere Foundation Grant. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of 7.05 signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. Aye. Those not in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions? The motion carries. We're on to 7.06, change orders. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve 7.06 change orders.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve change orders. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions? The motion carries. All right, we're on to 8.0 consent agenda. Does anyone on the board wish to pull a consent agenda item for discussion?
No.
Seeing none. Okay. All right.
I'll move. So you're calling for a motion?
I would entertain a motion on those then.
I'll move to approve agenda item 8.0, the consent agenda in its entirety.
Second.
Discussion? Oh, did we get a second?
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the entire consent agenda being approved, 8.01 through 8.06. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions? The motions or the consent agenda stands approved. We're on to 9.0 informational. K through 12 Internet Access Program Reimbursement Grant Award. Who's going to speak to that?
It's just informational. If anybody has questions, they can answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to whoever was able, I mean, I'm assuming we had to apply for this and reach out. So thank you. Huge thank you to whoever got this ball rolling.
And our organizational effectiveness, Dr. Harmon, if you'd like to share some thoughts.
Good evening again, President Hamada, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley. This is related to, I believe, what Director Vengadasam was speaking to earlier. There were certain funds, and there'll be I won't say a series of these, but there may be a few more that will come because other organizations, I know that there's one with the ESD, where technically it is grant dollars, but they're not competitive grant dollars. So it's not that we necessarily had to come to the board for approval to apply for a grant. They are afforded to KSD in the community by default, but we wanted to put them on informational because technically grant is in the name, so that they are there for tracking purposes. So there you are.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harmon. All right, moving on to 10.0. And I believe we read all the audience communication. So we're on to board reports and discussions. Who would like to lead off?
I guess I'll go. Well, I appreciated hearing about Wellness Week at KSD. I took my own Wellness Week last week, took a vacation, and so I really believe all of us need that, just a refresher, get away from the madness of this COVID days. I think we're all experiencing it, and I appreciated receiving Dr. Watt's message on that. I also I did participate with our first graders at Meadow Ridge, and I thank Ms. Collins and our principals there for allowing me to spend the morning with our kiddies there. It was just a great experience for me because I really felt like the kids were quite possibly the most diverse students I've seen in the classroom, and they were just excited to see a person that looked like them, I think. And it was just, I don't know how our first grade educators do it, because they're all speaking at the same time, and it's very difficult to understand, but they were very busy learning consonants, and I really appreciated being part of that. Thank you to all of our educators for and our families for our historic graduation rates, and really proud of our team, and thank you, Dr. Watts, as our leader. We give you credit for all that you've accomplished for our students. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you all for all the work that you do. And also thank you to Kent Schools Foundation for raising so much money for our classrooms. Appreciate all their efforts as well. Thank you.
I'll go. I want to thank everyone for attending, and I echo what Director Bengal-Daslam said about the graduation rates. I'm just thrilled and very impressed, and I know the hard work that has gone into it over the last several years and the focus, and so I really appreciate the leadership of Dr. Watts and his team really having an impact in making this happen. I am also planning on taking some time off, so I have my son came home from college a week early because of course, the COVID shutdowns, as many students. I know I've heard lots of my friends, lots of kids are showing up early. So that means Costco runs and lots of other things. But I am just thankful I think that, it really is important. I recognize that there are so many that don't have as much to be thankful for, but at the same time, I still am thankful daily. And for the people around me, for the people that I work with, for the people that are committed to educating and supporting our students and families. And I know Kent is our district is committed to that. And I really do appreciate that. I do see the work that goes into everyone from, the administrative department all the way down to custodians and those that work every single day to make a difference for our kids. And it is appreciated and recognized. I don't know that it's recognized enough, so I try to do it at every meeting. So thank you so much for all that you do. And we recognize that you sacrifice time with your families and your loved ones to try and make things better for our students and our families. So thank you so much for stepping up to that challenge. I hope that everyone does have some time to take over the next week, whether you recognize the holiday or not, to be able to regroup and reset. That is very important and very necessary. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
I'll go. I just wanted to say that the graduation rates are amazing. I had to mute myself when Dr. Watts was saying the statistics, because I'm like going, yeah, in the background. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was something that Dr. Watts had mentioned in his superintendent's report about the Thanksgiving holiday, and how for a lot of Indigenous people here, it is a day of mourning and not a day of celebration. Like, so many of us do celebrate. And I want to say, that I am thankful that the Kent School District has the time and memorial curriculum that they teach to the children, because I can tell you that's not what I learned growing up. I learned the traditional white savior. We came and civilized all these people, and then they were mean to us and we didn't do anything wrong, a version of our history. So I appreciate that the school district definitely is teaching our kids what the truth is, because I didn't learn the truth until I was a grown up. And, and I'm really glad, and it makes my heart very happy to see the relationship that the Kent School District is building with the Muckleshoot tribe. And I hope that relationship grows and that there is more that comes out of that. I know for me and in my house, I've mentioned this a billion times, that my daughters are Native American, registered Samish tribe. And, the last few years, it really been on my mind to not celebrate Thanksgiving as like the traditional Thanksgiving. So I really thought hard about it, and I talked to my children about it, and they decided that they would like to rename it. And so we renamed it the Leaf Festival. And we went out this last weekend and gathered leaves and pine cones, and we're going to use those to, decorate our house and just kind of bring nature more inside and be together as a family. So trying to change it up a little bit so it doesn't have the same connotation as what I knew growing up. But I just kind of challenge everybody to maybe rethink, what they think about their holiday a little bit, maybe do something a little bit different this year as far as their traditions go. We definitely are, and I'm very excited for that. But yeah, thank you very much.
I'll go. Again, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I'm excited that our students are succeeding and everyone involved with that. It's very important. That's what we're here for. We want our students to succeed, and we want them to be successfully prepared for their futures. So again, I echo all those sentiments and thank everyone involved, especially during these times. I also went to first grade this month. I went to Mrs. Henry's first grade class at Lake Young's. And again, we had a very interesting conversation about brunch. Brunch is the combination of breakfast and lunch. That was very fun. And yes, it's as Director Vengadaswaram noted, our first grade teachers are amazing. And so I'm hoping to go to every grade. I've been to first and third. I want to go to some more so I can cover all the grades. I kind of hear my son's 11th grade classes. So, when he's doing that, we did have to get a desk because we had to pull him out of his bed and make sure he was sitting at a desk. He had a table, but it wasn't a real desk. So, again, and I feel blessed that we have that because, we heard from public comment. I kind of set that aside, the public comments the students made, and hope that we can find a way to answer them. What is the plan to help families who've lost their homes or their jobs? How are we going to support that? I'm trying to read. Seniors are required to complete high school and beyond plans, but it's hard for some of them to complete it online. So what are we doing to support that? I would like an answer. I would like an answer for all these questions because they asked some really thoughtful questions. The homework issue, I think that's, something else to address, with it. I do notice that because these classes are a block class, there is a lot of homework, especially for our high school students. I'm trying to read. I'm reading very fast. And then we wanted to address bias in teaching in any way. And that kind of goes back to our conversation we had with the superintendent's goals. I think it was Director Vengadaswaram that said, can we call out that we want racial equity training? So again, that's something that was asked, and I do think it should be a focus. And school supplies, students who are unable to get the school supplies pickup, what can we do to support them? I personally know of one teacher who drove materials to her students. And I loved this one, the National Honor Society, they wanted to volunteer to potentially clean the grounds. They're looking for volunteer hours. I know that's very important for students on the National Honor Society. So if there is a way that we can give them opportunities to beautify our schools right now, or do something else, volunteer in some other ways. And then the last question, I think, was some students live in harsh conditions and they're forced to stay home in potentially dangerous conditions. And I know we're working on social emotional learning and things like that. But again, I think all those questions that came today were impactful and important. And I would like to get answers to these students, maybe on the website or in some other form. I know I start tomorrow is week 5 of coaching and leading for racial equity class. And I'm also attending the WASTA conference. Luckily, they're doing because it's online and virtual, the sessions in the morning are repeated in the evening, so I can attend everything. So I'll be attending 2 days of the WASTA conference and coaching and leading for racial equity, week 5. And I thank everyone for being online tonight and participating. And I hope that during these next couple of months, everyone gets a chance to rest and recharge. I think it's very good advice. So I echo my colleagues' sentiments on that as well.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you all for coming and taking an active part in our school district tonight. Each and every one of you are a part of making our district what it is today. Well, without the you, the citizens, there would be no districts or schools. We can never forget that just like our democracy, it takes active participation to keep it working and working well. It has been my honor to represent all of you this past year. As I've done in my past reports, I try to update you on what I and the board has been up to from the last regular board meeting. And as of tonight, we have our second session with the superintendent on his goals and key performance indicators. And we finalized those tonight with our vote. We have also scheduled 2 other dates in the future to share the progress on those goals with our superintendent. The board formalized their goals earlier with a vote. We have also formalized by vote a calendar for the year, which also is a fluid document that can change from time to time. Tonight, we experienced a preview of the financial dashboard that our Citizens Financial Action Committee will be bringing forward for the public in the future, and we've accepted a new board member with them and a new youth board member that they presented. This is a vital and functioning citizens committee that is still working, and we want to thank them for their service. We have to date tried to focus on maintaining jobs and employees with our district in a pandemic situation as much as possible, and we have not been in the bad position of having to be forced to have layoffs in our district. We valued those people in our workforce. Friday evening in our special meeting the board held, we passed a one-time restoration of commitment stipend and vacation payout for our non-represented staff. And even though I am personally aware of the hardships many of our community face today, we tried to reinforce the importance of keeping and retaining a premier workforce by offering them the same as their representative staff have received. And it also appears we are able to maintain a financial budget that's pretty well in place. Watching those factors closely has always been on my radar. I'm taking a great deal of pleasure in taking my coaching and leading with equity classes. We've watched the White Fragility video by Robin DiAngelo. We've covered whose culture has capital, and I've been acting upon that very issue, and also covering rejecting deficit mindset, honoring wisdom of communities of color. It's a very interesting perspective, and I hope to bring forth that more in the future. And we also talked about how we probably are speaking in the news media and other places about the Black men who have experienced police brutalities, but we seldom speak about the women. And they went through all the different women in this video and the atrocities that they had experienced, and it was educational to me. In addition, I have met with individual staff member who a board director read during our meeting a letter for the second time to share what I've been learning and also to connect that person's thoughts on my leadership going forward. I want to thank tonight all our vets for their service and hope the community gets a chance to view some of the presentations our students put together to honor them. I met on a Teams meeting this week with one of our students and her principal on a project she wants to bring forward. And what a perfect example of how knowledgeable and put together one of our students was, and the PowerPoint presentation she delivered to me, and I hope to share that ongoingly with others and Dr. Watts. Next month, we have one board meeting where we typically reorganize our officers. And I hope our board of directors will be preparing for who wishes to run for president, vice president, and legislative rep. Fulfilling all the duties of all board directors is an extremely important job. Your community depends upon you, and our children depend on it in our community. There is no other task to me personally as a mother, grandmother, and now board director than making sure my children and the community's children are a top priority and get all the help they need to succeed in life and follow whatever it is they wish to pursue. I'm excited to be continuing as a board director and serving and learning and listening to my community throughout the year. But I just want to let everybody know tonight, I will not be running for president again, as it is time for another director to fill that position. I am thankful for our entire staff, partners, parents, and our students. I wish each and every one of you a happy Thanksgiving. And also, I'm going to end this with the statistics on our kids is phenomenal. Dr. Watts, you're a big part of that. And I do honor you for that and our staff. And it makes as I said, it's the gift that will keep on giving. So if we have no other further comments or anything, I believe we stand adjourned. Good night.